Chapter 321. Find a place to hide. The ninth-tier heavy sword-wielding undead would never forget Yi Li. He and Yi Li had a deep-seated enmity like water and fire, with hatred as vast as the 3 rivers and 4 seas. Yi Li. The ninth-tier heavy sword-wielding undead clenched his teeth tightly, as if his teeth were about to shatter. The ninth-tier crazy bull looked Yi Li up and down. This was his first time seeing Demon King Yi Li. Earlier, the ninth-tier heavy sword-wielding undead had described Yi Li as if he were a legendary figure. "Are you Demon King Yi Li?" The ninth-tier crazy bull stared at Yi Li and asked. "Yes." Yi Li nodded. Upon hearing this, the ninth-tier crazy bull's expression turned cold. Although the Apocalypse Legion consisted entirely of ninth-tier zombies, there were tens of thousands of crazy bulls. What gave Yi Li the right to remain so calm in front of him? "Yi Li, I heard that you have 2 divine weapons, the dragon-slaying blade and the heavenly tower. I also heard that you are a demon who can even fly. Are you really so powerful?" The Tier 9 crazy bull sneered. Even if the 6 zombies in the Apocalypse Legion were all Tier 9, so what? He was not afraid at all. The fear he had shown earlier was simply because he was surprised that the zombies would attack Dark Race members. Yi Li smiled faintly. Although there were many crazy bulls, they were nothing before him. Zhao Yun had entered and exited Changbampo 7 times, moving freely among hundreds of thousands of troops. Today he wanted to compare with Zhao Yun, ready to take the enemy's head from among the 10,000 troops as if plucking fruit from a bag. "Demon King Yi Li, now hand over the dragon-slaying blade and the heavenly tower. You have nothing left to hesitate about." The ninth-tier crazy bull stared at Yi Li. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. Yi Li and the Apocalypse Legion dared to confront a Dark Race tribe like this. It was intolerable. Xiaxi was deeply shocked. At this moment, there were simply too many Dark Race members standing in front of her, numbering in the tens of thousands. At the same time, she understood a piece of truth, which was that she didn't know the height of the sky and the width of the earth before. She was just a speck of dust in the world, but she actually dared to come to the inner area of the falling rock mountain range to find the heart of darkness. Yi Li smiled faintly. He looked at the ninth-tier crazy bull and said slowly, "You really want my dragon-slaying blade and the heavenly tower?" The dragon-slaying blade and the heavenly tower were both one of the 10 great divine weapons. By gathering all the 10 great divine weapons, one could pry into a shocking secret. Since ancient times, no one had ever gathered all the 10 great divine weapons. "Of course I want your dragon-slaying blade and the heavenly tower. You'll die today anyway, no matter if you hand them over or not," the level 9 crazy bull said arrogantly. The Tier 9 heavy sword-wielding undead also stared at Yi Li. If it weren't for Yi Li, he wouldn't have been like a stray dog. "Yi Li, next year today will be the anniversary of your death." The Tier 9 heavy sword-wielding undead also said coldly to Yi Li. Yi Li was slightly stunned when he heard that. He thought that the strength of this heavy sword-wielding undead race was about the same as that of the crazy bull Dark Race. Then why did this Tier 9 heavy sword-wielding undead run when he went to the Abyssal Gorge? Did this Tier 9 heavy sword-wielding undead think that he could kill me with the help of the crazy bull Dark Race? Or was he just bragging? Silence, a deathly silence. The crazy bulls were only waiting for their leader's command, and they would all attack together. Yi Li looked at Xiaxi calmly and said, "When the fight breaks out later, find a place to hide. In the falling rock mountain range, good people don't die and neither do bad people. Only foolish people die. I hope you're not one of the foolish ones." Chapter 322. Capture the leader first. Upon hearing Yi Li's words, Xiaxi nodded. She knew that she had no power to resist in such a battle. Yi Li looked at the 9th-tier crazy bull and the 9th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead. He spoke calmly, "At this point, what is there left for you to hesitate about? Come at me." With those words, Yi Li gestured with his finger towards the 9th-tier crazy bull and the 9th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead. The 9th-tier crazy bull seethed with anger. As the leader of the crazy bull race, he had never suffered such humiliation. Attack. In response to the command of the 9th-tier crazy bull, countless crazy bulls charged towards the Apocalypse Legion like a dark storm. Yi Li and the Apocalypse Legion stood still like statues. He took out the dragon-slaying blade from his system space and rested it on his shoulder, his face as composed as ever. The 9th-tier crazy bull sneered, thinking that even if Demon King Yi Li and the Apocalypse Legion were powerful, they couldn't withstand the wrath of the crazy bull army. The 9th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead also sneered. After the brief moment earlier, he had figured it all out. Now he wanted Yi Li to know what true regret felt like. As the countless crazy bulls were about to attack, Yi Li also gave the order. "Kill." Just one word, neither more nor less. With that, the Apocalypse Legion shot out, moving at a speed that was astonishing. A giant fist from Ada combined with attacks from wind, rain, thunder and lightning. Bai Wawa's Qilin foot swept horizontally, terrifying in its power. Hongya filled the sky like snowflakes, as she unleashed her frigid true energy from her palms. Yutong petrified her enemies, emitting a burst of radiant energy. Swordsman Achi unleashed his death-dealing triple ghost sword and the ghost sword 13 styles. Bone Maiden devoured her foes with her great devouring technique. Yili knew that there were too many crazy bulls, and his goal now was to capture the enemy leader's head from among the 10,000 troops. Suddenly Yili activated his swift steps. The speed of the SSS-class swift steps was so fast that it couldn't be captured by the naked eye. In an instant Yili had reached the side of the 9th tier crazy bull and the 9th tier heavy sword-wielding undead. Yili was currently at the 8th tier level, and there was almost no chance of defeating 2 9th tier dark race members. Therefore, when Yili activated the swift steps, he had already bought a berserk potion from the Point Mall. He consumed the berserk potion and activated the 3rd level of the ancient demon tome. Instantly, a demonic aura enveloped Yili, making him look like an invincible demon. The 9th tier crazy bull and the 9th tier heavy sword-wielding undead hadn't reacted yet when Yili raised his dragon-slaying blade. A cold glint appeared first, followed by a slash like a dragon. Swish. The berserk potion could increase the strength of a genetic warrior by 10 times, but the side effects were quite obvious. During the time in Abandoned City, Yili had fallen into a coma for a year after drinking 10 of them. With his dragon-slaying blade held high, Yili struck with a single blow. The 9th tier crazy bull and the 9th tier heavy sword-wielding undead were one level higher than Yili, so they hurriedly dodged. In the end, the strike did not land on them. Demon King Yili, you are seeking death. The 9th tier heavy sword-wielding undead sneered. In his eyes, Yili without the Apocalypse Legion was not a threat. Unfortunately, Yili had already consumed a berserk potion. Brother Crazy Bull, let's attack together and take the dragon-slaying blade and the heavenly tower from Yili's hands. The 9th tier heavy sword-wielding undead looked at the 9th tier crazy bull. Good, today, Demon King Yili will die on the spot. The 9th tier crazy bull declared coldly. Chapter 323, Fighting 2 9th tier dark race members alone. Immediately, the 9th tier crazy bull and the 9th tier heavy sword-wielding undead launched a fierce attack on Yili. The 9th tier crazy bull wielded a star-studded stone axe, while the 9th tier heavy sword-wielding undead brandished a 1000-catty heavy sword. The demonic energy from the 3rd level of the ancient demon tome had already been pushed to the extreme by Yili. The aura around him and the dragon-slaying blade became even more intense. Just as the attacks from the 9th tier crazy bull's star-studded stone axe and the 9th tier heavy sword-wielding undead's 1000-catty heavy sword were about to hit Yili, he swung the dragon-slaying blade. Clang! The star-studded stone axe, heavy sword and dragon-slaying blade collided heavily. These were weapons used by 9th tier dark race members, and they weren't cut down by the dragon-slaying blade in a single blow. Following that, the 9th tier crazy bull and the 9th tier heavy sword-wielding undead increased their strength. However, it was simply absurd that they tried to compare strength with Yili. After all, had Yili's strength not improved significantly after opening the zombie treasure chest for so long? Coupled with the berserk potion, Yili's strength had reached a terrifying level. Is this all the strength you have? Yili said lightly. The 9th tier crazy bull and the 9th tier heavy sword-wielding undead were taken aback. They hadn't expected Yili's strength to be so astonishing. As 9th tier dark race members themselves, they had planned to overpower Yili with their strength. However, Yili's calm demeanor in the face of their attack surprised them. As the saying goes, one real strong man can defeat 1,000,000 troops. Yili took a few steps back, raising the dragon-slaying blade high and coldly announcing, Flame Blade Technique. Countless fire blades burst forth from the dragon-slaying blade, rushing towards the 9th tier crazy bull and the 9th tier heavy sword-wielding undead. The 9th tier crazy bull and the 9th tier heavy sword-wielding undead quickly used their respective skills to defend against the attack. Power of the Stars. After defending against the flame blade technique, the 9th tier crazy bull shouted, and the color of his star-studded stone axe turned crimson. He raised the star-studded stone axe and flew towards Yili at lightning speed. Black Cloud Sword. The 9th tier heavy sword-wielding undead also shouted coldly, and the 1000-catty heavy sword emitted a demonic light, looking quite terrifying. Yili took a few steps back, a mocking expression appearing on his face. He thought to himself that ninth-tier dark race beings were indeed different, especially when there were two of them. Dealing with them would be a bit tricky. Primordial demon slash. One word at a time he spoke slowly. Suddenly, 3,000 god and demon phantoms attacked the ninth-tier crazy bull and the ninth-tier heavy sword-wielding undead. After consuming the berserk potion, Yi Li's strength had even surpassed that of a ninth-tier dark race member. It was just that there were two of them. The ninth-tier crazy bull and the ninth-tier heavy sword-wielding undead were horrified. Even if they used all their strength, they couldn't have imagined that Yi Li could unleash such a terrifying attack. They had thought that, aside from the Apocalypse Legion, Yi Li was just a paper tiger. But they had never expected the situation to turn out like this. The ninth-tier crazy bull and the ninth-tier heavy sword-wielding undead had no time to dodge because the 3,000 god and demon phantoms were too fast. So they could only defend themselves by using their strongest skills. Boom! The attack from the 3,000 god and demon phantoms hit the ninth-tier crazy bull and the ninth-tier heavy sword-wielding undead. Both of them were seriously injured, and at the same time the effects of the berserk potion had worn off. The ninth-tier crazy bull and the ninth-tier heavy sword-wielding undead exchanged glances. Suddenly they both had the same thought in their minds. That was, to escape. Chapter 324. Frenzied Escape. Yi Li thought that he had underestimated the power of ninth-tier dark race members. He had expected that after the effects of the berserk potion wore off, he could at least kill one of them. He didn't want to continue drinking the berserk potion because he might fall into a deep sleep again, and he didn't want to be unconscious for a dozen days or more. After being hit by the 3,000 god and demon phantoms, the ninth-tier crazy bull and the ninth-tier heavy sword-wielding undead had the idea of fleeing for their lives. They didn't know if Yi Li would launch another terrifying attack at them. At this point, the Apocalypse Legion had killed countless crazy bull beings, but their numbers were still overwhelming. Dark King Yi Li, for the injuries you inflicted upon me today, I will return them to you 100-fold in the future. Let's hope we meet again under different circumstances, the ninth-tier crazy bull said coldly to Yi Li. Retreat! With that command from the ninth-tier crazy bull, the crazy bulls quickly fled the area. Their speed was the fastest they had ever reached since birth, and they wished they had grown a few extra legs. Yi Li had no intention of pursuing them. He was already too exhausted to chase them, and he thought that being a ninth-tier evolved being was still too weak. If he had been a ninth-tier evolved being, neither the ninth-tier crazy bull nor the ninth-tier heavy sword-wielding undead would have been able to escape. During the escape of the crazy bull, the Apocalypse Legion killed many crazy bulls, and the ground was already covered in blood. Xiaxi hid in a corner watching this scene. There were no words to describe her feelings at this moment. Only now did she understand what it meant to be a frog in a well. From birth, she had been an outstanding talent, and very few of her peers could compare to her. This had led to her developing a cold and aloof personality. But now, she understood that her pride in her talent was laughable in the eyes of some people. Yi Li put the dragon-slaying blade back into the system space. His face, which had been as pale as jade, was now even paler. This was a side effect of the berserk potion. Drinking just one bottle wouldn't cause him to fall into a deep sleep, but it would leave him extremely weak. Ada by Wawa Hongye Yutong, swordsman All Chi and Bone Maiden gathered around Yi Li. Master! The 6 zombies called out in unison. Yi Li nodded and then found a place to sit down. He needed to recover slowly. Although he hadn't killed the 9th-tier crazy bull and the 9th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead, they were definitely seriously injured. It was unlikely that they would recover anytime soon. Yi Li thought that he should find the Heart of Darkness first. The Heart of Darkness was the heart of a 10th-tier dark race, and it might have some unexpected effects for him. Just like when he ate the purgatory fruit, he had comprehended the ancient demon tome. If he found the Heart of Darkness and consumed it, he might gain access to other incredible attack skills. Xiaxi walked up to Yi Li and with a fearful look in her eyes, asked softly, Yi Li, why do they call you Demon King Yi Li? She had wanted to ask this question for a long time but had been too afraid to do so. Now her curiosity got the better of her, and she mustered the courage to ask. Yi Li smiled faintly. Perhaps they think I'm approachable. Xiaxi was taken aback. She glanced at Yi Li's somewhat pale face and asked, Yi Li, are you injured? Chapter 325. Journey to the Dark Land. Yi Li didn't answer Xia Zai's question. It was already evening, and the setting sun painted half the sky red like a burning cloud. Well, stay here for the night, Yi Li said slowly. He needed some rest. He found a place and lay down. He slept through the night and woke up the next morning. Zombie Treasure Chest X6. Yi Li opened the zombie chest with a single command: 800 genetic points, 800 strength points, 800 speed points, 800 defense points. A super treasure map. After a night's rest, Yi Li's energy had fully recovered, and his face, once pale, now showed a healthy color. Luck was like chewing a piece of gum. Once it started you couldn't stop. A super treasure map. Could it be? Yi Li suddenly thought of an astonishing possibility. The treasure of this super treasure map might be the Heart of Darkness. What an incredible possibility. Without further thought, Yi Li activated the super treasure map. Coordinates: Dark Land. The coordinates of the Dark Land appeared in Yi Li's mind. Yi Li smiled faintly. Just from the name Dark Land, he knew it was no ordinary place. Perhaps it really was the Heart of Darkness. He took out a box of food from the system space. After accumulating for so many days, there were countless boxes of food in the system space. After eating their fill and drinking, Yi Li and Xiaxi set off for the Dark Land. The Dark Land was a considerable distance from the ruined city. Yi Li and Xiaxi slowly walked out of the city. Along the way they encountered many dark races and zombies, as well as some animals infected by the zombie virus. Yi Li killed the dark races and the animals infected by the zombie virus with ease. He synthesized a first-tier male zombie and a first-tier female zombie. As they got closer to the Dark Land, Yi Li heard some commotion. We, the Golden Wind Exploration Team, are secretly heading to the Dark Land. Do you know why? Why? I've received reliable information that the Heart of Darkness is hidden in the Dark Land. What? More than a dozen men were stunned. Such news was explosive to them. Yi Li glanced at the men's levels and found that all of them were fourth-tier evolved beings, which was not bad. Is the Heart of Darkness really in the Dark Land? One of the fourth-tier evolved beings asked incredulously. That's right. The team leader and deputy team leader should be arriving soon. Let's wait here, one of the men replied. Soon more than a dozen men sat down and began to rest. Listening to the conversation among the dozen or so men, Yi Li smiled faintly. Just as he had thought, the treasure of this super treasure map was indeed the Heart of Darkness. Yi Li approached, with Xiaxi following closely behind. One of the Golden Wind Exploration Team members was discussing the Dark Land with his companions when he suddenly froze in disbelief and rubbed his eyes. The other members of the Golden Wind Exploration Team also noticed and followed his gaze. When they saw what the man was looking at, they were all dumbfounded. Humans? A man and a woman? The more than a dozen members of the Golden Wind Exploration Team couldn't believe that two humans had appeared before them. Just as the Golden Wind Exploration Team members were stunned, Yi Li and Xiaxi had already arrived in front of them. Chapter 326. I've reserved the Heart of Darkness. The members of the Golden Wind Exploration Team were all dumbfounded. They never expected to encounter humans here. And, just a moment ago, Yi Li and Xiaxi were in the distance and they couldn't see their faces clearly. Now Yi Li and Xiaxi were right in front of them and they were shocked to their core. They're too good-looking, aren't they? The members of the Golden Wind Exploration Team couldn't have imagined that there were humans in this world who looked so good. Yi Li had a handsome and refined appearance with starry bright eyes. Especially his eyes, once seen, could never be forgotten. It was as serene as a tranquil night and as deep as a boundless sea. Xiaxi's face was delicate as jade, her long black hair cascading down like a waterfall, making her look like a fairy descended from heaven. Have you seen enough? Yi Li spoke calmly. The members of the Golden Wind Exploration Team snapped out of their daze at his words. Why are you here, little brother? One of the fourth-tier evolved beings asked with hostility, looking at Yi Li. As soon as he said this, more than a dozen members of the Golden Wind Exploration Team looked at Yi Li, wondering how Yi Li would answer. Yi Li smiled faintly. Are you qualified to know why I'm here? A dozen members of the Golden Wind Exploration Team were shocked. They didn't expect Yi Li to say such a thing. I've explored the Falling Rock Mountain range for so many years, but I've never seen such an arrogant person. I think you probably don't know how cheap human lives have become since the apocalypse broke out, a fourth-tier evolved being said disdainfully. All the members of the Golden Wind Exploration Team wore contemptuous smiles. In their eyes, Yi Li was just an ignorant person. You just said the Heart of Darkness was in the Dark Land, right? Yi Li spoke slowly, and his expression remained unchanged. As soon as they heard this, the members of the Golden Wind Exploration Team all understood. Yi Li's purpose for coming here was the same as theirs, to find the Heart of Darkness. That's right. The Heart of Darkness is definitely in the Dark Land, a fourth-tier evolved being said with a smile. The members of the Golden Wind Exploration Team were not worried, because Yi Li and Xiaxi were really not worth mentioning in their eyes. They could naturally tell that Xiaxi was a Tier 3 evolved being, but they couldn't tell Yili's realm. However, they believed Yili's level couldn't be high, as even a first-tier evolved being could suppress their levels. Someone who was with a third-tier evolved being couldn't possibly be a powerful individual. Xiaxi shook her head when she saw this. These people had spoken so arrogantly in front of Yili, and she already knew what their fate would be. Since the Heart of Darkness is in the Dark Land, you can leave. The Heart of Darkness has already been reserved by me, Yili said calmly. The members of the Golden Wind exploration team were all stunned. Even if they preferred to believe that the apocalypse hadn't occurred, they couldn't deny that Yili had become incredibly arrogant. Do you really not know how to write the word death? A fourth-tier evolved being stared at Yili. In the apocalypse, except for the base cities, human lives were as cheap as grass, especially in the wilderness. Yili's expression remained unchanged as he heard this. It was as if he hadn't heard at all. He looked around and picked up a small branch. With the small branch, he drew a character on the ground that looked like the word death. Is this how you write death? Yili asked calmly. Chapter 327. How do you write the word death? The members of the Golden Wind exploration team were infuriated by this scene. You brat, I think you're asking for trouble, shouted a fourth-tier evolved being in anger. Yili smiled calmly. I neither accept toasts nor threats, because no one is qualified to have a drink with me. His words left the members of the Golden Wind exploration team seething with rage. You're looking for death. With a swift motion, a fourth-tier evolved being unsheathed a Nepalese kukri knife and swung it fiercely at Yili. The Nepalese kukri knife in the fourth-tier evolved being's hand was custom-made, extremely powerful, and gleamed with cold light. Yili sighed inwardly. Why were there always so many uncultured flies around? Flies should have their own self-awareness. Without any attempt to dodge, Yili acted as if he hadn't noticed the Nepalese kukri knife coming towards him. The members of the Golden Wind exploration team saw this and were delighted, as they had thought that Yili was acting so arrogantly because he had some strength. Now, it seemed that they were mistaken, not just mistaken but profoundly so. Because Yili had been scared out of his wits and didn't know how to avoid it. The members of the Golden Wind exploration team could easily imagine how tragic Yili's fate would be. Xiaxi was also shocked. She never expected Yili to stand there without dodging. If the Nepalese kukri knife struck, Xiaxi couldn't even finish her thought. The Nepalese kukri knife in the hands of the fourth-tier evolved being had already struck Yili's body heavily. Clang. To everyone's astonishment, the Nepalese kukri knife made a sound as if it had collided with steel when it struck Yili's body. What? The members of the Golden Wind exploration team couldn't help but gasp in amazement. The Nepalese kukri knife made a sound as if it had collided with steel when it struck Yili's body? This was a knife. And it was a custom-made Nepalese kukri knife. They couldn't even begin to imagine how tough Yili's body must be. No way, this can't be happening. How could my Nepalese kukri knife be like this? The fourth-tier evolved being exclaimed in shock. Yili smiled faintly. Nepalese kukri knife? You mean the thing you just tried to hit me with? With those words, Yili slowly raised two fingers and placed them on the Nepalese kukri knife, then twisted his fingers lightly. Crack. With a crisp sound, the Nepalese kukri knife shattered into pieces. How was that possible? The sound of steel colliding with Yili's body had left them witnessing the most unbelievable scenes in history. And now Yili broke the knife with his bare hands. Yili secretly smiled. Ants were easily shocked. As a Tier 8 evolved being, the defense of his body was beyond the imagination of these Tier 4 evolved beings. More than a dozen members of the Golden Wind exploration team were already dumbfounded. They had thought that Yili was scared silly when he didn't dodge just now. But now they realized that they had made a huge mistake. At this moment, there were no words that could describe the shock of these dozen genetic warriors. They had never been so shocked since they were born. Xiaxi let out a sigh of relief. When Yili didn't dodge just now, it had startled her. But now she finally understood that someone like Yili had no need to worry about anything at all. Yili looked calmly at the dozen or so members of the Golden Wind exploration team. After a few seconds, he slowly spoke. So how do you write the word death? Chapter 328. The captain of the Golden Wind exploration team. The dozen or so members of the Golden Wind exploration team were terrified when they heard Yili's question. They had initially believed that Yili was like a lamb to the slaughter, and they were the executioners. But now, everything seemed to have been turned upside down. We are members of the Golden Wind exploration team, and our captain and vice-captain are about to arrive, said a fourth-tier evolved being in a frightened tone. Yili smiled faintly. He despised being threatened more than anything else. Why did people always do this? In fact, if you don't attack me, there's still a chance for you. But now you're in a hopeless situation, Yili calmly stated. You're just skilled in martial arts at most. Our team captain is a 6th-tier evolved being. The 4th-tier evolved being attempted to intimidate Yili by mentioning their captain. But unfortunately, if Yili were to be frightened away, would he still be called Yili? What's going on? A sudden voice reached Yili's ears. He followed the voice and saw 2 middle-aged men approaching. Both men appeared to be around 40 years old, with one being a 6th-tier evolved being and the other a 5th-tier evolved being. "It's the captain and vice-captain," exclaimed one of the members of the Golden Wind Exploration Team. Upon seeing their captain and vice-captain arriving, the members of the Golden Wind Exploration Team breathed a sigh of relief. The tension that had been building up in their throats finally subsided. "Captain, he wants to compete with us for the Heart of Darkness." A Tier 4 evolved being pointed at Yili and said fiercely. The captain and deputy captain of the Golden Wind Exploration Team looked at Yili and looked him up and down before asking in a low voice, "Little brother, do you want to compete with our Golden Wind Exploration Team for the Heart of Darkness?" Hee. The captain of the Golden Wind Exploration Team was taken aback. "Why are you laughing?" He couldn't understand why Yili was still able to laugh in this situation, and neither could the vice-captain nor the other members. Only Xiaxi understood. She naturally knew that these people were like ants in front of Yili. "Do you really think I am here to compete with you for the Heart of Darkness?" Yili said lightly. The captain was puzzled. "Could it be that you're not here to compete with us for the Heart of Darkness?" Yili shook his head slowly. "Your brain is a good thing, too bad you don't have one. Accusing me, Yili, of competing with you for the Heart of Darkness? Are you even worthy?" Yili slowly asked. Silence, a long silence. The captain of the Golden Wind Exploration Team would never have dreamed that Yili would utter such arrogant words. He had thought that Yili had come to compete with them for the Heart of Darkness. However, the vice-captain of the Golden Wind Exploration Team snorted coldly. He glared at Yili and angrily shouted, "Kid, do you know who we are?" Yili smiled again. "Aren't you just ants?" With this statement, everyone in the Golden Wind Exploration Team was furious. The vice-captain was even more enraged. "Kid, we are the Golden Wind Exploration Team." He assumed that anyone who dared to enter the inner circle of the Falling Stone Mountain Range must have heard of the reputation of his Golden Wind Exploration Team. But unfortunately, he never would have imagined that Yili's face remained calm and unaffected by their threats. "Kid, I'll give you a chance to leave this place or else don't blame me for being impolite," the vice-captain shouted in anger. Chapter 329. Turn them all into zombies. Upon hearing these words, the members of the Golden Wind Exploration Team couldn't help but smile. Although the scene of Yili's body enduring a blade and breaking it with a single hand had been terrifying, they assumed it was merely a display of martial arts skill. Now that the captain and vice-captain were present, they wondered how Yili could still be so arrogant. Yili smiled again. Upon seeing the smile on Yili's face, the vice-captain of the Golden Wind Exploration Team became even angrier. "Brat, you can still laugh?" He really didn't understand how a person could still laugh when he was about to die. "Why wouldn't I smile? Don't tell me you don't realize that you're already dead?" Yili said calmly. When these words came out, everyone from the Golden Wind Exploration Team was stunned. He still dared to say such things? "You could have lived peacefully, but unfortunately you've provoked me, Yili. How about one turn you all into zombies?" Yili suggested. "Turn us into zombies?" The members of the Golden Wind Exploration Team were dumbfounded. They couldn't fathom what Yili meant. Yili didn't want to waste more words on them and released Alda from the system space. When the Golden Wind Exploration Team suddenly saw Alda appear, they all instinctively took 3 steps back. But when they looked into Alda's eyes, they were even more horrified. "An 9th-tier zombie?" The captain of the Golden Wind Exploration Team widened his eyes, finding it hard to believe. The others were no different. Their eyes were wide open and the terror on their faces was beyond description. Even if they racked their brains, they couldn't have imagined that a 9th-tier zombie would appear. "Alda, turn them into zombies," Yili said calmly. As he spoke, Alda began to take action. The strongest members of the Golden Wind Exploration Team were only 6th-tier evolved beings, and in front of Alda, they were pitifully weak. In an instant, all the members of the Golden Wind Exploration Team were turned into zombies. The captain and vice-captain of the Golden Wind Exploration Team saw this and were terrified. They turned and fled at the fastest speed they had ever achieved in their lives. However, if they managed to escape from Ada, was Ada still Alda? Roar! Arda roared and swiftly caught up to the captain and vice-captain, turning them into zombies as well. Yili opened the synthesis grid in his mind and synthesized all the members of the Golden Wind exploration team into zombies. Not bad, he managed to create a third-tier male zombie. After putting Alda and the third-tier male zombie into the system space, Yili looked at Xiaxi and said, "Let's go." Xiaxi nodded. After spending several days with Yili, she had come to understand that in the face of events, Yili remained unfazed no matter what happened. As soon as Yili took a step forward, the sound of helicopter rotors could be heard. Whir whir whir. In an instant a strong wind began to blow. Yili nodded slightly. He saw 2 armed helicopters hovering in the sky about to land. There were prominent letters on the helicopters, Xia. Xiaxi was surprised. My family's helicopters. 2 armed helicopters began to descend, and more than a dozen people disembarked. Dad. Xiaxi called out to a man in his 50s who appeared to be about 50 years old. She rushed over to him. The man was taken aback. Sierra, you're not dead. Chapter 330, Xiaxi leaves. Dad, what are you saying? Xiaxi looked at the middle-aged man and said. The middle-aged man quickly patted his forehead and said, Sierra, Gubai said you died inside the inner area of Falling Stone Mountain, and he was quite certain of it. So, I led people to come and look for you. Thank goodness you're really okay. Xiaxi had mixed feelings upon hearing this. She secretly glanced at Yili. If it weren't for him, she would have become the wolf's prey a long time ago. The middle-aged man was named Xia Hong, the head of the Xia family in the Sky Blue Bay City, an 8th-tier evolved being. Sierra, who is he? Xia Hong looked at Yili and asked. Dad, Xiaxi hesitated and didn't know how to explain to her father. She was afraid that speaking the truth might displease Yili. Seeing that Xiaxi wanted to say something but hesitated, Xia Hong became a little puzzled. He looked at Xia's face and became even more puzzled. He remembered that Sierra used to be as cold as ice. Why did she seem to be? Xia Hong was sure that something must have happened in the past few days to change Sierra's personality. And the young man in front of him? He must be the key to this transformation in Sierra's personality. Thinking of this, Xia Hong walked up to Yili and looked at his face. He couldn't help but be shocked. When he was young, he was undoubtedly a heartthrob in the Sky Blue Bay City, and he had captured the hearts of countless girls. However, compared to Yili, it was like one in the sky and the other on the ground. Who are you? Xia Hong asked Yili. Yili looked at Xia Hong indifferently. Xia Hong was dressed in a military uniform and appeared to be around 50 years old. Despite his age, he exuded a powerful and dignified aura, and his face seemed light golden. Do you think I need to answer you? Yili replied calmly. When these words came out, not only Xia Hong but also all the genetic warriors from the Xia family who had come were shocked. None of them had ever heard anyone speak to the family head in such a manner. Xia Hong was stunned as he stared at Yili. He was also a bit dazed. As a prominent figure in the Sky Blue Bay City and an 8th-tier evolved being, he had never encountered someone like Yili before. Since you're her father, take her away from here, Yili said calmly. Having Xia Zai's father here was convenient. It was a good opportunity to take Xiaxi away. At this point, Yili still had no idea about the level of danger within this dark land. Xia Hong frowned when he heard Yili's words. He felt as though Yili was ordering him, and he had never encountered such a person before. Noticing that something was amiss, Xiaxi quickly walked to her father's side. Dad, let's go back, Xiaxi said to Xia Hong. Although she felt a bit reluctant to leave Yili since Yili had said so, she had to go back. Xia Hong had originally wanted to say something to Yili, but Xiaxi forcibly pulled him away. She understood that with Xia's family members present, they were no match for Yili and the Apocalypse Legion. She didn't want the Xia family members to be turned into zombies. Whir whir whir. The 2 armed helicopters began to take off and soon disappeared from Yili's sight. Yili thought that he would enter the Dark Land next. He released the army of the post-apocalyptic world from the system space and slowly walked towards the Dark Land. In no time Yili entered the Dark Land. It was a pitch-black land with no signs of life. Sunlight could barely penetrate and it sent shivers down one's spine. What met Yili's eyes were terrifying graves, one after another. Chapter 331. An ancient zombie. These graves and the tombstones must have been there for a long time, and the inscriptions on them had become blurry. Looking at these graves, Yili couldn't help but think of the West Mountain burial mound, where there were also a lot of graves. Yili wondered if the Heart of Darkness was in these graves. Could it be that he had to dig up each of these graves one by one? Yili pondered for a few seconds, realizing that this might be the only way. Just as he was about to start, a black light appeared not far away. Following the black light, Yili found it peculiar and decided to walk towards it. After just a few steps, the black light slowly rose. Yili stared at the black light, feeling somewhat stunned. The Heart of Darkness? Inside this black light was a heart that was still beating, looking extremely strange. After a few seconds of observation, Yili was certain that the heart within this black light was indeed the Heart of Darkness. Immediately Yili reached out with a hand, ready to grab hold of the Heart of Darkness. However, it seemed like the Heart of Darkness wanted to evade, but it couldn't escape Yili's grasp. The Heart of Darkness was firmly seized by Yili and continued to beat incessantly. Just as Yili was about to examine the Heart of Darkness carefully, suddenly, countless desolate graves cracked open. Hands emerged from the graves, and if an ordinary person were here, they would likely have been scared to death. The creatures coming out of the graves, although they were also zombies, were somewhat different from the ones Yili had encountered before. That was because these zombies were all wearing armor and wielding spears. Could they be ancient soldiers? Roar, roar. Hundreds of ancient zombies howled as if they were feeling the joy of seeing daylight again. A few seconds later Yili understood. These ancient zombies must have been infected by the Heart of Darkness to become zombies. This place must have been where the ancient soldiers were buried, and the reason they emerged from their graves was probably because he had captured the Heart of Darkness. These were just ordinary zombies and Yili found it strange but didn't feel threatened at all. The hundreds of ancient zombies naturally noticed Yili, and they charged towards him like thirsty people in the desert suddenly finding water. Roar, roar. Yili raised his finger and golden spiritual light began to wrap around it. Then he fired it like a machine gun. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. With countless sounds of breaking wind, over 100 ancient zombies fell to the ground. Yili wanted to examine the Heart of Darkness he held in his hand, but he never expected that there would be someone else. Swish. Suddenly a cold light flashed in the air. Yili naturally dodged, feeling bewildered. Could there be traps or ambushes here? As he looked ahead, his face lit up. Standing 10 steps away from him was a zombie, a third-tier zombie wearing golden armor and wielding a huge halberd. This zombie was as tall as Ada and looked extremely imposing, looking like an unrivaled fierce general who used to charge into battle in ancient times. At first glance, Yili knew that this zombie would be the 7th one he would cultivate. Suddenly the zombie lunged at Yili. In Yili's opinion, a tier 3 zombie could be defeated with a single finger. He raised his finger and activated the One Yang finger. This zombie instantly lost its combat power. Chapter 332, Zombie Long Yu. This ancient zombie was a 3rd-tier zombie. Yili checked the system space and found that there was a 3rd-tier male zombie in there, which had just been synthesized using the members of the Golden Wind exploration team. He opened the synthesis grid in his mind and dragged the 3rd-tier male zombie onto the ancient zombie. The ancient zombie transformed into a 4th-tier zombie. A master. The ancient zombie awkwardly called out to Yili. Yili thought he should give this zombie a name. What should he call it? After a few seconds of contemplation, Yili came up with a name. How about Long Yu? From now on, I'll call you Long Yu, Yili said slowly to the ancient zombie. Yes, master, Long Yu replied respectfully. Now he had cultivated another zombie, and the Apocalypse Legion had a total of 7 zombies. But now, Yili looked at the Heart of Darkness in his hand. According to legend, this black heart was the heart of a 10th-tier dark race member left behind after death. Without much thought, Yili swallowed the Heart of Darkness in one gulp. Ding! Congratulations to the host for acquiring the S-level skill, Sky Demon Tyrant Blade Technique. Congratulations to the host for upgrading the Ancient Devil Tome to the 4th level. Congratulations to the host for becoming a 9th-tier evolved being. Just as Yili expected, he acquired a new skill and had unexpected surprises. The Ancient Devil Tome was upgraded to the 4th level, and he had become a 9th-tier evolved being. Now that he was a Tier 9 evolved being plus the 4th level of the Ancient Devil Tome, if he fought the Tier 9 Crazy Bull and the Tier 9 Skeleton Undead again, they would definitely die. Now there's a new member. Yutong nibbled on her finger. He looks quite handsome, hee. Wawa giggled. But it seems like he's only a 4th-tier zombie, Alda said. Yili smiled. Don't worry. Long Yu will soon be at your level. Now it was time to take revenge. Yili smiled faintly. He was very unhappy that the Tier 9 Crazy Bull and heavy sword-wielding undead had escaped. With the Apocalypse Legion stored in the system space, he walked out of the Dark Land. He originally thought the Dark Land was very dangerous, but it seemed it was just SOSO. He didn't know where the 9th Tier Crazy Bull and heavy sword-wielding undead had fled to, so he had to find out. After thinking for a few seconds, he decided to go to the Abyssal Gorge to inquire. Activating his swift steps, he arrived at the Abyssal Gorge. After jumping down the abyss, Yili reached the entrance of the underground palace. Outside the underground palace, there were a dozen 3rd-tier heavy sword-wielding undead guarding it. They were originally discussing something, but when they saw Yili approaching, they were all frightened out of their wits. The Demon King Yili? The scene where Yili had displayed the 3 unparalleled strikes outside the underground palace last time was something they would never forget. "Let your new leader come out and see me," Yili said slowly. As soon as the dozen 3rd-tier heavy sword-wielding undead heard this, they didn't dare to hesitate and all rushed inside. Before long, all the heavy sword-wielding undead came out, led by an 8th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead. "Demon King Yili, do you really think my heavy sword-wielding undead tribe is easy to bully?" The 8th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead stared at Yili fiercely. The entire heavy sword-wielding undead tribe was in shock, and they naturally knew how terrifying Yili was. "I'm not here to exterminate you." "Don't worry," Yili said indifferently. When these words came out, the heavy sword-wielding undead tribe was all stunned. He wasn't here to exterminate them? "Demon King Yili, since you're not here to destroy us, what are you here for?" The level 8 heavy sword-wielding undead stared at Yili. Chapter 333, King Kong Ape Tribe. Hehe. "I go wherever I want. Who can stop me?" Yili looked indifferently at the 8th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead. The 8th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead was taken aback. "Demon King Yili, what do you want?" "I want to know what major forces are present within the inner area of the Falling Rock Mountain Range, aside from the heavy sword-wielding undead tribe and the Crazy Bulls," Yili said slowly. The heavy sword-wielding undead tribe was surprised by Yili's unexpected question. In the inner area of the Falling Rock Mountain Range, besides the heavy sword-wielding undead tribe, there is also the King Kong Ape Tribe, the 8th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead replied. Although he didn't know why Yili was asking this, he knew that if he didn't answer, the consequences would be beyond his imagination. Yili thought that the 9th-tier Crazy Bull and the 9th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead might have fled to the King Kong Ape Tribe. "How do I get to the King Kong Ape Tribe?" Yili continued to inquire. "It's to the south of the Abyssal Gorge, just keep going," the 8th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead answered. Immediately Yili leaped into the air and left the underground palace. The entire heavy sword-wielding undead tribe was left baffled. They never expected Yili to just leave like that. After leaving the Abyssal Gorge, Yili activated his swift steps and headed south. At night, Yili suddenly saw a red light descending from the sky, like a meteor falling. It didn't take long for it to emit a deafening explosion. Yili thought it might be a meteor and didn't think much of it. He continued to use his Godspeed steps towards the territory of the King Kong Ape Tribe. Outside the territory of the King Kong Ape Tribe, Yili spotted a few King Kong apes whispering to each other. King Kong apes were tall creatures, and the higher their tier, the taller they were. The few he saw were all at the 3rd tier, standing at around 2 meters tall. There was a huge explosion last night, and now the leader and the tribe's elites have gone to the site. The leader seems to suspect that a shocking spiritual treasure fell from the sky. I feel it must be a shocking spiritual treasure. The leader of the heavy sword-wielding undead tribe and the leader of the Crazy Bull tribe have also gone. Yili was at a distance from the few 3rd-tier King Kong apes, and their voices were very faint, but his hearing was exceptionally sharp, so he heard everything clearly. He walked over and wanted to ask about the location of the incident. He initially thought it was a meteor, but now it seemed to be something else. As the few 3rd-tier King Kong apes were speaking, they suddenly noticed a young man approaching them. They were stunned and then rubbed their eyes because they couldn't believe their eyes. A human had actually appeared before them. However, no matter how hard they rubbed their eyes, there was still a young man standing before them. Suddenly, the few 3rd-tier King Kong apes burst into uncontrollable laughter. "Haha, a human. It's actually a human." Immediately, the few 3rd-tier King Kong apes hurried over to Yili. "Human, are you lost?" One of the 3rd-tier King Kong apes asked Yili. "Lost?" Yili smiled faintly. "Why waste time talking to this human? It's been so long since I've had human flesh," one of the 3rd-tier King Kong apes said. With that, one of the 3rd-tier King Kong apes pounced at Yili. As the saying goes, natural disasters can be survived, but self-inflicted sins are unforgivable. Yili had only wanted to ask a few questions, but these third-tier King Kong apes seemed to insist on choosing their own fate. He had no choice but to oblige them. Chapter 334. Half of the Eastern Emperor Bell. A third-tier King Kong ape rushed at Yili, but in Yili's eyes, third-tier King Kong apes were as insignificant as dust. Activating his heavenly spirit eye, a shocking golden light shot straight from his eyes. The third-tier King Kong ape that had charged at Yili was instantly pierced through and fell heavily to the ground. What? This. The other few third-tier King Kong apes widened their eyes, unable to believe what had just happened. They were in a state of shock. Yili smiled indifferently. In his eyes, these were just ants. How could they understand his true power? Yili calmly approached the other few third-tier King Kong apes, his face expressionless. Seeing Yili approaching, the few third-tier King Kong apes backed away as if seeing a ghost coming to claim their lives, unable to stop retreating. Human, what do you want? We are the King Kong ape tribe. One of the third-tier King Kong apes said. Yili shook his head inwardly, wondering why there were always so many lowly flies threatening him. Speak up, where did your leader go? Yili asked slowly. The few third-tier King Kong apes were puzzled, not understanding why Yili was asking this question. Oh, our leader went to the strange stone forest, one of the third-tier King Kong apes answered in fear. The strange stone forest? This was the first time Yili had heard of this name. Just keep going east from here until you see a stone forest. That's the strange stone forest, the King Kong ape explained. Yili nodded and then looked at the few third-tier King Kong apes. Do you have any last words? Yili asked calmly. He had only intended to ask a few questions, but these few third-tier King Kong apes insisted on seeking their own doom. What else could he do? When the Tier 3 King Kong apes heard Yili's words, they were horrified. We are from the King Kong ape tribe. If you dare to do anything to us, you will definitely... The words of this King Kong ape were never finished because a terrifying blood hole appeared on its forehead, and it would never have the chance to finish speaking. The other two third-tier King Kong apes saw this and tried to flee. But how could they escape? Swoosh swoosh. With two wind-breaking sounds, the two escaping third-tier King Kong apes were dead. After retracting his finger, Yili activated his swift steps and headed east. It didn't take long for Yili to see a vast stone forest. This stone forest was incredibly large, with strange rocks everywhere. There were standing rocks like blades and reclining rocks like tigers. Using his heavenly spirit eye, Yili saw a trace of smoke rising from the center of the strange stone forest. Suddenly, a cold smile appeared on Yili's face. There were the 9th tier Crazy Bull, the 9th tier heavy sword-wielding undead, and a giant King Kong ape that was at least 8 meters tall, followed by dozens of high-leveled King Kong apes. Among them, there was a strange bell, entirely red in color, with peculiar patterns on it. But the bell was only half and the other half was missing. Looking at this bell, Yili couldn't help but shudder all over. Could it be one of the 10 great divine weapons, the Eastern Emperor Bell? Even though it was only half, it was enough to make people feel suffocated. The 9th tier Crazy Bull, 9th tier heavy sword-wielding undead, and 9th tier King Kong ape all wanted to lift this half of the bell, but even if they exerted all their strength, they couldn't move it. Yili walked over. If this really was half of the Eastern Emperor Bell, then he had hit the jackpot coming to the Falling Rock Mountain range this time. Chapter 335. A human, what on earth is this? Even I, a crazy bull, can't lift it? The 9th tier Crazy Bull angrily exclaimed. Don't just blame yourself. Even I can't lift it. The 9th tier King Kong ape said. The 9th tier heavy sword-wielding undead thought for a moment and then said, this bell is only half, but it's so heavy. Could it really be a priceless treasure? They also suspected it might be a treasure, but what kind of treasure is only half a bell? Suddenly, the 9th tier heavy sword-wielding undead seemed to remember something, and he stared in shock at the half-bell. Could this be one of the 10 great divine weapons, the Eastern Emperor Bell? As soon as these words were spoken, not only the 9th tier Crazy Bull and King Kong ape, but all the high-leveled King Kong apes were also shocked. The Eastern Emperor Bell? After careful consideration, they realized how astonishingly possible this was. It descended from the sky and was so heavy. Haha, brother skeleton, this might really be half of the Eastern Emperor Bell. The King Kong ape burst into laughter. We must try to move this Eastern Emperor Bell. The 9th tier Crazy Bull also laughed. After a few laughs from the King Kong ape, he suddenly remembered something and looked at the ninth-tier heavy sword-wielding undead, saying, "That Demon King Yi Li." As soon as the words Demon King Yi Li were spoken by the King Kong ape, the faces of the ninth-tier crazy bull and the ninth-tier heavy sword-wielding undead instantly darkened. Demon King Yi Li, his Apocalypse Legion is all 6th-tier zombies. We are no match for them. A few seconds later, the ninth-tier heavy sword-wielding undead seemed to lose his energy, his voice filled with helplessness. The ninth-tier crazy bull also felt somewhat helpless. Although he had boasted in the ruined city saying things like, "Let's wait and see," he was just bluffing it. Since then he had become afraid of Yi Li, deeply afraid. "I think you're giving too much credit to that human, undermining your own confidence. Even if Demon King Yi Li and his Apocalypse Legion are strong, our King Kong ape tribe is not to be trifled with." The ninth-tier King Kong ape said disdainfully. The ninth-tier crazy bull and the ninth-tier heavy sword-wielding undead exchanged a glance and gave a bitter smile. They had thought the same thing before, but the results were self-evident. "Don't worry, as long as Demon King Yi Li and his Apocalypse Legion dare to appear in front of me, one will make them understand what fear is. For now, let's get this half of the Eastern Emperor Bell out," the ninth-tier King Kong ape said. The other high-leveled King Kong apes also smiled coldly. They were used to being dominant in the falling Rock Mountain range. Who cared about Demon King Yi Li and his Apocalypse Legion? At this moment, a 6th-tier King Kong ape looked in a certain direction. Huh. The 6th-tier King Kong ape was stunned for a moment and thought he might have seen it wrong. He rubbed his eyes and looked again, and indeed, there was a young male human slowly approaching. A human. The 6th-tier King Kong ape pointed in a certain direction and exclaimed. The 9th-tier King Kong ape, the 9th-tier crazy bull, the 9th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead, and the other high-leveled heavy sword-wielding undead immediately followed the direction pointed. When they saw this, the 9th-tier King Kong ape and dozens of high-leveled King Kong apes were all stunned. But the pupils of the 9th-tier crazy bull suddenly contracted. As for the 9th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead, who had no eyes, he took 3 steps back, and his entire skeleton seemed to be on the verge of falling apart. "Demon King Yi Li!" the 9th-tier crazy bull shouted. The 9th-tier King Kong ape and dozens of high-leveled King Kong apes were also shocked. "The Demon King Yi Li?" Chapter 336. I'm here for 2 things. The 9th-tier King Kong ape widened his eyes. He had heard the name Demon King Yi Li dozens of times in the past few days, but now he was finally seeing the real person. The 9th-tier King Kong ape was an absolute king in the falling Rock Mountain range, even stronger than the 9th-tier crazy bull and 9th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead. In recent days, the 9th-tier crazy bull and 9th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead had been bragging about how formidable Demon King Yi Li was when they were around him. They said that Demon King Yi Li possessed 2 ancient divine weapons, the dragon-slaying blade and the heavenly tower. They also mentioned how terrifying Demon King Yi Li's Apocalypse Legion was. They spoke of the fist god zombie Ada, the iron-footed zombie by Wawa, the ice zombie Hongya. From the words of the 9th-tier crazy bull and 9th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead, it was not difficult to hear that Demon King Yi Li was an unparalleled force. As the absolute ruler of the falling Rock Mountain range, the 9th-tier King Kong ape had heard more than enough of this praise for Demon King Yi Li. The 9th-tier King Kong ape looked coldly at Demon King Yi Li, and a faint smile crossed his lips. "So, you are Demon King Yi Li?" The high-leveled King Kong apes also examined Demon King Yi Li, wanting to know who he was and why he had made the 9th-tier crazy bull and 9th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead so afraid. After all, they were all 9th-tier dark race members. Demon King Yi Li stopped in his tracks and calmly looked at the 9th-tier King Kong ape. He replied, "That's right, 1 a.m. Demon King Yi Li." The 9th-tier crazy bull and 9th-tier heavy sword-wielding undead exchanged glances because the psychological trauma inflicted upon them by Yi Li was incredibly great, something they would never forget in their lifetimes. The 9th-tier King Kong ape smiled coldly and said, "Demon King Yi Li, you've been making quite a few waves in the falling Rock Mountain range recently. It had been a long time since there had been such a tumultuous event in the falling Rock Mountain range. It had always been the King Kong ape tribe, the crazy bull tribe, and the heavy sword-wielding undead tribe. Yi Li's appearance changed the layout of the falling Rock Mountain range drastically. It's not a big deal. To me it's just a small matter." Yi Li replied nonchalantly. The 9th-tier King Kong ape's expression turned cold as he stared at Yi Li. "Demon King Yi Li, do you really think you can run rampant in the falling Rock Mountain range?" The 9th-tier King Kong ape stood at a towering height of 8 meters, resembling a dragon with well-developed limbs and a simple mind. However, the ninth-tier King Kong ape was by no means as simple-minded as he appeared. Since Demon King Yili had managed to make the ninth-tier Crazy Bull and ninth-tier heavy sword-wielding undead so afraid, Yili must have some strength. "I'm here for two things," Yili said calmly. "Firstly, I came to kill the ninth-tier Crazy Bull and ninth-tier heavy sword-wielding undead. They escaped last time and am not happy about it. Secondly, want this half of the Eastern Emperor Bell. But I've changed my mind now. Seeing how terrified the ninth-tier Crazy Bull and ninth-tier heavy sword-wielding undead are of me, one decide not to kill them." Yili spoke slowly. Being feared by others was much better than being respected, a timeless truth. "Demon King Yili, are you really this arrogant?" The ninth-tier King Kong ape couldn't contain his anger. Yili smiled faintly and spoke slowly, one word at a time. "Yes, I have always been this arrogant." Silence, a deathly silence. "Yili, you really want kill us?" A few seconds later, the ninth-tier heavy sword-wielding undead was the first to break the silence. "Of course not. If I say I won't kill you, then I won't kill you," Yili replied indifferently. Chapter 337. Say what you want to say. The ninth-tier Crazy Bull and ninth-tier heavy sword-wielding undead, upon hearing this, exchanged glances as if communicating with their eyes. After a few seconds they gritted their teeth and nodded heavily. "Very well then, well leave." With that, the ninth-tier Crazy Bull and ninth-tier heavy sword-wielding undead departed from the area. "Come back. What are you doing? Come back. Come back." The ninth-tier King Kong ape shouted loudly at their retreating figures, but the ninth-tier Crazy Bull and ninth-tier heavy sword-wielding undead seemed to pay no attention at all and didn't even turn their heads. Upon seeing this, dozens of high-leveled King Kong apes were left in disbelief. Were they really scared away just like that? Yili had always thought of himself as neither a good person nor a bad person, and he didn't need to explain his actions to anyone. "What about you?" Yili looked at the ninth-tier King Kong ape and asked calmly. The ninth-tier King Kong ape was momentarily stunned, then he glared fiercely at Yili. "Demon King Yili, what do you want?" Yili smiled and said, "If you want to die or if your King Kong ape tribe wants to be exterminated, then come over. If you don't want that, then get lost." With these words, the ninth-tier King Kong ape's body shook. It had been many years, how many years since he had heard someone speak to him like this? "Demon King." The ninth-tier King Kong ape gritted his teeth, his voice cold and resentful. Yili chuckled and thought that this ninth-tier King Kong ape was trying to display his dominance and anger. However, how could he dare to show anger in front of him? "Let me say it again, die or get lost." "I don't want to say it a third time," Yili said calmly. The ninth-tier King Kong ape's anger flared up, and he pounded his own chest hard, letting out a roar. "Demon King Yili, I'm gonna kill you." With that, the ninth-tier King Kong ape charged at Yili, and his huge body made the earth tremble. Yili looked a bit bored. After all, this ninth-tier King Kong ape was just a single individual, far from being a match for him. Then, Yili released his Apocalypse Legion from the system space. However, he didn't release Long Yu, as Long Yu was only a fourth-tier zombie. Ada by Wawa Hongye Yutong, Swordsman All Chi and Bone Maiden. 6 ninth-tier zombies. The ninth-tier King Kong ape, upon seeing this, stopped in his tracks and stared wide-eyed, the largest his eyes had ever been in history. The ninth-tier Crazy Bull and ninth-tier heavy sword-wielding undead had told him more than 10 times that Demon King Yili's Apocalypse Legion had 6 ninth-tier zombies, but he had never taken it seriously. Now, 6 ninth-tier zombies were right in front of him. This. The ninth-tier King Kong ape couldn't believe his eyes, and the scene before him left him gasping for breath. Dozens of high-leveled King Kong apes were already scared out of their wits. 6 ninth-tier zombies. They hadn't even heard of such a thing before. "Come here and let my Apocalypse Legion see what you're capable of," Yili said calmly to the ninth-tier King Kong ape. Where could the ninth-tier King Kong ape still dare to attack? These were 6 ninth-tier zombies. "Demon King Yili, this is unfair." The ninth-tier King Kong ape steadied his emotions and stared at Yili. Yili was taken aback for a moment. Could it be that this ninth-tier King Kong ape still had something to say? This was interesting. "Say what you want to say," Yili said calmly. Chapter 338. Sky Demon Tyrant Blade Technique. The ninth-tier King Kong ape stared at Yili and spoke coldly. "Demon King Yili, one know you're strong, but right now, I'm not at my full strength." Yili smiled. "Oh? How can you show your true strength then?" "My King Kong ape tribe's army has not arrived yet, Demon King Yili. If you're truly daring, Do you dare let me call for reinforcements? The ninth-tier King Kong ape said. Yi Li shook his head inwardly. The act of decapitating an enemy general from among thousands of troops was something he had done many times since he transmigrated to this parallel world. This ninth-tier King Kong ape was already doomed, so why not agree to his request? Go ahead, Yi Li said calmly. With these words, not only the ninth-tier King Kong ape but also dozens of high-leveled King Kong apes couldn't help but be delighted. Suddenly, the ninth-tier King Kong ape shouted loudly, "Send the signal." As he spoke, a sixth-tier King Kong ape sent out a signal unique to the King Kong ape tribe. Like an arrow piercing through the clouds, thousands of troops came to meet. In no time at all, the earth began to shake violently. Countless King Kong apes rushed over, as if a dark tide was pressing down, completely surrounding Yi Li and his Apocalypse Legion. The ninth-tier King Kong ape's face began to glow with excitement because Yi Li still had the dragon-slaying blade and the heavenly tower. If he could obtain them, his strength would increase by several levels, and he would no longer have to submit to the wilderness zone. Demon King Yi Li, I really admire you. The ninth-tier Crazy Bull and the ninth-tier heavy sword-wielding undead praised you so much that I thought you were very clever, the ninth-tier King Kong ape said smugly. Yi Li's face remained unchanged. He spoke slowly, in the falling rock mountain range only one kind of person will die, and that is the foolish one. The dark race is no exception. The ninth-tier King Kong ape was taken aback and then roared in anger after a few seconds. Demon King Yi Li, why are you not afraid at this point? Yi Li and his Apocalypse Legion were surrounded by his King Kong ape tribe. As long as he gave the order, Yi Li and his Apocalypse Legion would likely be wiped out in an instant. He couldn't understand why Yi Li was so indifferent. This was not just a few hundred King Kong apes, there were tens of thousands of them. Do you think I need to be afraid? Yi Li looked at the ninth-tier King Kong ape calmly. The ninth-tier King Kong ape gritted his teeth and became incredibly angry. He had never been this furious from birth until now. In that case, I'll let you die. Kill Demon King Yi Li and his Apocalypse Legion. With the ninth-tier King Kong ape's order, countless King Kong apes rushed toward Yi Li. Capturing the leader first was an old but eternal principle, and it was the same in this case. Yi Li gave an order to his Apocalypse Legion to attack the ninth-tier King Kong ape. In an instant, all 6 ninth-tier zombies from the Apocalypse Legion leaped into the air and attacked the ninth-tier King Kong ape. Yi Li retrieved the dragon-slaying blade from the system space. These ignorant King Kong apes dared to surround him, so he would give them a taste of his blade first. Suddenly Yi Li seemed to remember something. When he was in the dark zone, he had absorbed the Heart of Darkness and gained a skill that he hadn't practiced yet, so he decided to give it a try. Ding! Does the host want to practice the S-level attack skill, Sky Demon Tyrant Blade Technique? Yes. Practicing the S-level attack skill, Sky Demon Tyrant Blade Technique. 10%, 30%, 60%, 100%. Practicing of the Sky Demon Tyrant Blade Technique completed. Chapter 339. The situation is hopeless. The system's prompt sounded in Yi Li's mind. A slight smile appeared at the corner of Yi Li's mouth, and a wicked grin played on his face. King Kong apes from all directions were only a few steps away from him. He leaped into the air and activated the 4th level of the Ancient Demon Tome. The demonic energy from the 4th level of the Ancient Demon Tome was incredibly dense, and the sky became shrouded in dark clouds. Now, as a 9th-tier evolved being, coupled with the 4th level of the Ancient Demon Tome, he knew how strong he had become without even needing to think about it. The King Kong apes were all horrified. They had never experienced such a suffocating feeling. Yi Li raised the dragon-slaying demon blade high and slowly uttered, Sky Demon Tyrant Blade Technique. As he spoke, a formidable demon god phantom wielding a giant blade launched an attack with incredible speed. Boom! Instantly, a deafening explosion rocked the earth. The King Kong apes had not yet recovered, and they didn't know how many were dead or injured. Yi Li considered that the Sky Demon Tyrant Blade Technique was not as powerful as the Primordial Demon Slash yet. After all, the Primordial Demon Slash was an SSS-level skill, while the Sky Demon Tyrant Blade Technique was only an S-level skill. Just as the countless King Kong apes were recovering from the shock and looking at Yi Li in horror in midair, Yi Li raised the dragon-slaying blade again. Primordial Demon Slash. As he spoke, the blade fell heavily. 3,000 terrifying demonic phantoms attacked, moving at the speed of lightning. Another earth-shattering explosion shook the ground and caused it to tremble. Yi Li smiled faintly as he looked at Alda and the others, who were still engaged in battle, while the 9th-tier King Kong ape watched coldly. Yili activated the swift steps in midair and left behind only an afterimage in place. Swish. A terrifying cold light struck the ground instantly, bisecting dozens of King Kong apes. The ninth-tier King Kong ape watched Yili approach, inexplicably filled with fear. Quick! Stop Demon King Yili! Unfortunately, Yili was like a martial arts hero from a Chinese TV series. He was literally flying in the air. Yili used the swift steps and disappeared from his original position once again. A cold glint appeared first, followed by a slash like a dragon. Yili swung the dragon-slaying blade horizontally, and the terrifying blade aura struck toward the ninth-tier King Kong ape. The ninth-tier King Kong ape was horrified. Although he had formidable defenses, this was the dragon-slaying blade, one of the 10 great divine weapons. It was said to be able to cut through the heavens, let alone him. The ninth-tier King Kong ape quickly dodged, narrowly avoiding Yili's attack. He looked at the scene before him. While the King Kong ape tribe still had many King Kong apes, they couldn't rescue him as the Apocalypse Legion blocked the way. The ninth-tier King Kong ape knew that the situation was hopeless and decided to escape. Unfortunately, in Yili's eyes, the ninth-tier King Kong ape was already a dead man. If he could escape from Yili's hands, he would be the first person Yili admired. However, Yili would never have anyone he admired. He didn't have one now, and he wouldn't have one in the future. Yili activated the swift steps and swiftly launched an attack. The escape speed of a ninth-tier Dark Race member was fast, but it depended on whom they were trying to outrun. Compared to Yili's swift steps, the speed at which the Tier 9 King Kong ape escaped was not worth mentioning. In an instant, Yili had caught up with the Tier 9 King Kong ape. Yili stood in front of the ninth-tier King Kong ape, looking at him with a faint smile. Do you want to escape? Chapter 340. Death of the ninth-tier King Kong ape. The ninth-tier King Kong ape was horrified. He never expected Yili to catch up with him so quickly. Demon King Yili you. The ninth-tier King Kong ape's words were interrupted by Yili. I already gave you chance earlier, but you didn't cherish it. I have no choice. Yili said indifferently. Hearing this, the ninth-tier King Kong ape's expression turned cold. As the ruler of the Falling Stone Mountain Range, when had he been pushed to such a desperate situation? Demon King Yili, do you really want to exterminate me? We have no deep-seated enmity. The ninth-tier King Kong ape stared at Yili. Yili smiled faintly. This is how one do things. There's no need for reasons. Accept your fate. As he spoke, Yili raised the dragon-slaying blade and swung it horizontally. A cold radiance shot towards the ninth-tier King Kong ape. The ninth-tier King Kong ape roared in anger and thrust out a punch with tremendous power. The space seemed to shatter from the force. Boom. The cold radiance of the dragon-slaying blade collided with the ninth-tier King Kong ape's punch. Swish. Yili activated the swift steps, leaving behind only an afterimage. The ninth-tier King Kong ape, seeing this, widened his eyes and quickly searched for Yili's figure. When Yili appeared again, he was already behind the ninth-tier King Kong ape. Before the King Kong ape could react, the dragon-slaying blade had pierced towards his back. In a battle between experts, every move was deadly. The ninth-tier King Kong ape had formidable defenses, but in front of the dragon-slaying blade, his impressive defenses were insignificant. The ninth-tier King Kong ape let out a horrified scream, blood spurted out continuously, and the scene could not be described with just one word: grim. The ninth-tier King Kong ape used all his strength to turn around, his eyes locked onto Yili. He clenched his fist, and an aura of malevolence enveloped it, as if he wanted to take Yili down with him. Suddenly, the ninth-tier King Kong ape's fist, filled with malevolence, struck heavily. This was his all-out attack. However, Yili's speed was incredibly fast. He activated the swift steps, and the ninth-tier King Kong ape's all-out attack couldn't even touch him. Sky Demon Tyrant Blade Technique. Yili leaped into the air, raising the dragon-slaying blade high and releasing the Sky Demon Tyrant Blade Technique. A peerless demon god rushed towards the ninth-tier King Kong ape with great force. The King Kong ape had already exhausted all his strength with his previous attack. At this moment, the ninth-tier King Kong ape had no chance of withstanding this peerless demon god. Boom! The peerless demon god crashed into the ninth-tier King Kong ape's body. The ninth-tier King Kong ape died instantly, and vanished. At this moment, Ada and the others were still in the midst of a fierce battle, and the strange stone forest was already soaked with blood. Yili pondered for a few seconds and then kicked the body of the ninth-tier King Kong ape. The King Kong ape's body was sent flying onto the battlefield, creating a deep crater on impact. The high-leveled and low-leveled King Kong apes watched, stunned. Yili came with his blade. He walked very fast as flying. The King Kong apes panicked. They didn't want to seek revenge for their leader. Instead, they wanted to escape. Primordial demon slash. 3,000 divine and demonic phantoms suddenly attacked, moving at the speed of lightning. Boom! Another earth-shattering explosion resounded. The remaining King Kong apes finally began to scatter in all directions, wishing they had more legs to run faster. Yili didn't pursue them. He had no interest in these King Kong apes. He looked towards the crimson bell not too distant. Chapter 341. Leaving the wilderness zone, Yili walked up to the half of the crimson bell in front of him. It was not a complete bell but only half of it, with strange patterns on the surface. He speculated that this should be the Eastern Emperor bell. Even the 9th tier King Kong ape, the 9th tier Crazy Bull, and the 9th tier heavy sword-wielding undead combined couldn't move this crimson bell. Ding! Detected a fragment of one of the 10 great divine weapons, the Eastern Emperor bell. Please pick it up, host. The system's voice suddenly appeared in Yili's mind. Yili's face lit up. It was just as he had expected. This was indeed one of the 10 great divine weapons, the Eastern Emperor bell, even though it was only half of it. After placing the dragon-slaying blade into the system space, Yili placed his hands on the fragment of the Eastern Emperor bell and lifted it upwards. This half of the Eastern Emperor bell was instantly lifted, and Yili smiled, realizing how strong he was. Since this was only half of the Eastern Emperor bell, it couldn't be touched or tested. After placing the fragments of the Eastern Emperor bell into the system space, the system's voice once again appeared in his mind. Ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining a chance to randomly draw a prize. Would you like to use it? Yes. Immediately, the virtual pointer began to spin in the roulette and stopped after a few seconds. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a super treasure map. Yili's face brightened. He had obtained another super treasure map. His luck was truly extraordinary. Open it. After opening the super treasure map, coordinates appeared in Yili's mind, and they were quite far from his current location, seemingly beyond the wilderness zone. Yili thought that he had spent enough time in the wilderness zone, and it was time to leave. Following the coordinates in his mind, Yili arrived at a small town. When he reached the small town, the coordinates in his mind suddenly disappeared. Yili was puzzled. The coordinates had never disappeared before when he reached his destination. Could this small town be the destination? It shouldn't be. When he arrived at the small town, there was still a considerable distance from the coordinates in his mind. Without thinking too much, Yili observed the small town in front of him. It was evident that this small town had also been subjected to the scourge of the undead and was in a dilapidated state. Yili activated the Heavenly Spirit Eye to scan the small town, revealing that there were only a few scattered zombies in this small town. However, there were also a dozen or so scattered human genetic warriors, all of whom were teenagers. These teenagers were surrounded by the corpses of zombies. Yili wanted to ask if there was a base city nearby. He had spent enough time in the wilderness zone and felt like he was becoming a wild man. Shortly after, he walked towards the direction of the teenagers. Before long, he spotted more than a dozen teenage genetic warriors. May I ask if there is a base city nearby? Yili inquired. The group of teenagers were in decent condition in terms of the realm. All of them were first-tier evolved beings, around 15 or 16 years old. The sudden voice startled the teenagers and they were taken aback. The teenagers stared at Yili in astonishment, and one of the bolder ones looked at him and said, Who are you? How did you get here? Yili was puzzled by the question. What did he mean? This is our Sky Blue Academy's primary trial ground. But you're not a student of Sky Blue Academy. The teenager continued. Sky Blue Academy? Yili pondered silently, feeling like he had heard this name before. She seemed to be from Sky Blue Base City. Could Sky Blue Academy also be related to Sky Blue Base City? Are you all from Sky Blue Base City? Yili asked. Chapter 342. Clawed zombies. The dozen or so teenagers were taken aback, and the bolder teenager replied to Yili, Yes, we're from Sky Blue Base City. They were all puzzled about where Yili had come from because there was only one base city within thousands of kilometers, which was Sky Blue Base City. After thinking for a moment, Yili felt that the treasure marked on the super treasure map might be here in this small town. He had to search for it. Subsequently, Yili ignored the astonishment on the faces of the teenagers and continued to use the Heavenly Spirit Eye to investigate this inconspicuous small town. Who are you? Suddenly a voice entered Yi Li's ears. Yi Li turned slowly and saw a middle-aged man in his 40s, a fifth-tier evolved being. Teacher Lin. The group of teenagers who were around 15 or 16 years old called out to the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man looked at Yi Li with caution. He couldn't discern Yi Li's level, but his intuition told him that Yi Li was not an ordinary person. Yi Li, is this place the primary trial ground of your Sky Blue Academy? Yi Li asked. The middle-aged man was a teacher from the Sky Blue Academy named Lin Shi. Lin Shi looked at Yi Li with disbelief. Are you from Sky Blue Bay City? No. Yi Li shook his head. Lin Shi was stunned when he heard this. If Yi Li wasn't from Sky Blue Bay City, where could he have come from? There was only Sky Blue Bay City within thousands of kilometers. Could it be? Lin Shi suddenly thought of a shocking possibility. Yi Li might have come from the wilderness zone because this small town was not too far from the outskirts of the wilderness zone. If I want to go to Sky Blue Bay City, which direction should I go? Yi Li asked Lin Shi. Since he had arrived at Sky Blue Bay City, he thought he might as well visit it. It would be a shame not to, especially when he had a super treasure map that might lead to treasure in this small town. Lin Shi was about to speak when a cold laugh reached Yi Li's ears. Haha, I didn't expect so many humans in this crappy town. The dozen or so teenagers were startled and looked at the dark race member before them in amazement. It was a soul spirit. Yi Li had seen quite a few soul spirits before. This soul spirit was a fourth-tier dark race member, one level lower than Lin Shi. Lin Shi breathed a sigh of relief. It was evident that this fourth-tier soul spirit posed no threat to them. We're from Sky Blue Academy. If you don't want to die, get lost. Lin Shi shouted at the fourth-tier soul spirit. Kiki. The fourth-tier soul spirit chuckled and continued, with so many humans here, wouldn't I be a fool to leave? Soul spirits love to devour human souls and spirits. Come out, zombies. After the soul spirit shouted, suddenly more than 100 zombies rushed out. Most of these zombies were first-level zombies. However, there were a few that caught Yi Li's interest. These zombies were second-level zombies, and what set them apart was their sharp claws, which gleamed with cold light. Yi Li had never seen clawed zombies like these before. He wondered if he could cultivate some of them. After all, in the Apocalypse Legion besides generals, there also had to be soldiers. The dozen or so teenagers were taken aback by the sudden appearance of more than 100 zombies. Human, come here and let me eat your souls. The fourth-tier spirit soul giggled. Lin Shi sneered. I'm afraid these 100 zombies are not enough. Chapter 343. Kill in seconds. The fourth-tier soul spirit sneered and looked at Lin Shi with scorn. Human, you're too presumptuous. As he spoke, two more fourth-tier soul spirits emerged. Lin Shi was taken aback. He hadn't expected there to be two more fourth-tier soul spirits. Now, with 3 fourth-tier soul spirits and 100 zombies, Lin Shi couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. Human, do you think that's enough now? The fourth-tier soul spirit sneered at Lin Shi. Lin Shi gritted his teeth but felt somewhat helpless. If he were alone, he would be confident in escaping. However, there were still over a dozen students with him. For a moment, the fifth-tier evolved being Lin Shi didn't know what to do. Haha, at this point, do you have anything worth hesitating about? Come over and let us devour your souls. This is your final end. One of the fourth-tier soul spirits chuckled. Lin Shi looked at the dozen or so students and said in a deep voice, Go, quickly. The dozen or so students were still in shock, standing motionless like statues. Go. Lin Shi shouted. Only then did the students snap out of their daze. They hurriedly ran back. Want to run? Attack them. The fourth-tier soul spirit shouted. Immediately, over 100 zombies charged forward. For a fifth-tier evolved being like Lin Shi, holding back over 100 zombies wouldn't be too difficult. However, the difficulty lay in dealing with the 3 fourth-tier soul spirits. While Lin Shi withstood the onslaught of over 100 zombies, the 3 fourth-tier soul spirits rushed towards the students from Sky Blue Academy. These students were only first-tier evolved beings, far from a match for the 3 fourth-tier soul spirits. The students from Sky Blue Academy were horrified. The 3 fourth-tier soul spirits chuckled and prepared to devour their souls. No! Lin Shi shouted. However, the 3 fourth-tier soul spirits paid no heed to him. In their eyes, the souls of these students were already easy prey. At this critical moment, a figure appeared in front of the students from Sky Blue Academy. It was a young man in his early 20s who was naturally Yi Li. Yi Li's face remained calm as he looked at the 3 fourth-tier soul spirits. The 3 fourth-tier soul spirits were taken aback. They hadn't seen how Yili had approached them. Could this human be a powerful individual? Leave, Yili said indifferently to the 3 4th-tier soul spirits. The 3 4th-tier soul spirits hesitated for a moment. One of them furrowed his brow and said, "Humans, stop pretending. You'll be next." Yili smiled. "Since you don't want to leave, then stay." With that, Yili raised his hand and golden spiritual light radiated from his fingers. Swish, swish, swish. With 3 wind-breaking sounds, the 3 4th-tier soul spirits had completely dissipated in the air. The students from Sky Blue Academy were shocked by this scene, their jaws dropping in disbelief. Lin Shi was also dumbfounded. The ability to kill 3 4th-tier soul spirits with a single strike was something he, as a 5th-tier evolved being, couldn't even imagine. Roar, roar. The zombies continued to attack Lin Shi. However, these zombies were ordinary and posed no significant threat to him. Yili paid no attention to the astonished students. He walked to the edge of the zombie horde and said to Lin Shi, "Step aside, let me handle this." Chapter 344. Arriving at Sky Blue Base City among the hundreds of zombies, there were several level 2 clawed zombies that Yili found quite interesting. He decided to synthesize a batch of them to play around with. While Yili effortlessly annihilated 3 4th-tier soul spirits, Lin Shi became aware of Yili's terrifying power. He leaped out of the encirclement of zombies. Roar, roar. The zombies rushed toward Yili. Among these zombies, the level 2 clawed zombies were of higher level and posed a slightly greater threat. Through observation, Yili found that these level 2 clawed zombies were much stronger than other level 2 zombies in terms of attack and speed. He raised his finger and a shocking golden spiritual light shot out like a machine gun. The zombies instantly lost their combat abilities. Yili activated the synthesis grid in his mind and began synthesizing zombies. There were 3 clawed zombies. Yili synthesized the 3 clawed zombies to level 5 and checked their attributes. Clawed zombie, level 5 zombie. Zombie attribute, speed. Zombie skill, steel blade. Yili thought their strength was not bad, but he wasn't sure how many of these clawed zombies were present in the different districts of Sky Blue Base City. The most important thing was to raise Long Yes level. Yili believed that the zombies he had cultivated so far were sufficient. Now it was time to create a real Apocalypse Legion. He placed the 3 level 5 clawed zombies into the system space and then noticed that Lin Shi and the students from Sky Blue Academy were frozen in shock. Lin Shi was about to say something but Yili interrupted him. "Don't worry, I'm not a member of the dark race," Yili said calmly. Lin Shi paused for a few seconds then understood. In this vast world there were all sorts of beings. If Yili were a member of the dark race, there would have been no chance for them to be saved. "Thank you for saving us, senior." Lin Shi quickly expressed his gratitude with a respectful salute. Yili waved his hand slightly. "It's nothing." "Senior, are you heading to Sky Blue Base City?" Lin Shi suddenly asked. Yili nodded. "Yes, it is." Lin Shi hesitated for a moment and then continued, "Senior, do you know anyone in Sky Blue Base City?" Lin Shi thought that if Yili was going to Sky Blue Base City to find someone, he might be able to help as he had some connections in the city. "Just take me to Sky Blue Base City," Yili replied. Lin Shi didn't press further. He knew that powerful individuals often had peculiar temperaments, and probing too much could provoke them. The students from Sky Blue Academy looked at Yili with admiration. His display of power had undoubtedly won them over. Subsequently, Lin Shi led Yili in the direction of Sky Blue Base City. Sky Blue Base City was a medium-sized base city with a population of over 60 million. It boasted formidable defenses and advanced technology. As they entered the outer city, Yili even spotted humanoid weapons, something he had only seen on television in China. Following Lin Shi into the outer city, they headed toward the main city. Sky Blue Base City's main city was extraordinarily luxurious, far surpassing many first-tier cities in China. "Senior, where are you heading now?" Lin Shi asked Yili. Yili thought that since he had arrived in such a bustling base city, he might as well take a look around. "You can go on your way, you don't need to worry about me," Yili said. Lin Shi nodded and said, "Senior, I'm a teacher at Sky Blue Academy. You are welcome to visit the academy." Chapter 345. Don't judge a book by its cover. After Lin Shi and the students from Sky Blue Academy left, Yili glanced at his tattered clothes and couldn't help but show a hint of dissatisfaction. He thought to himself that if he were in China he would probably be mistaken for a beggar. Just as he was about to raise his head, he noticed the surprised looks of passers-by. It seemed that in Sky Blue Bay City, it was impossible for someone dressed as shabbily as he was to appear. He should buy a few sets of clothes first. Yili opened the Point Mall. Now he no longer had to worry about points, so he exchanged some post-apocalyptic coins and activated his heavenly spirit eyes to find a shopping mall. Before long, Yili found a clothing store that seemed decent. He headed towards the store. Upon reaching the store, Yili was stopped by someone. "Sir, you can't enter," said the female attendant, looking at Yili with disdain. Yili couldn't help but smile inwardly. He didn't understand why he always encountered so many snobbish people. "Why can't I go in?" Yili asked calmly, looking at the young female attendant of his age. The female attendant's face showed a trace of disdain. She assessed Yili's clothes from head to toe, and her meaning was clear. Through the glass, Yili took a look at himself and was startled. His current appearance with a scraggly beard, disheveled hair, and tattered clothes did make him look like a beggar. "It seems like I've spent too much time in the wilderness. I almost turned into a wild man," Yili mumbled to himself. "Sir, please leave," the female attendant's voice rang in Yili's ears once again. Yili smiled. "You can see that my clothes are tattered. If one don't go in to buy some new ones, won't one have to be dressed like this all the time? Can you afford it? The clothes inside are something you can't even dream of wearing in your lifetime," the female attendant replied with even more disdain. Yili casually took out a handful of post-apocalyptic coins from his pocket and said, "Is this enough?" The female attendant was shocked. She couldn't have imagined that someone who looked like a beggar could easily produce so much money. Yili didn't pay any more attention to the female attendant. He strolled into the store. "Help me pick out several sets of well-fitting clothes," Yili calmly requested. Now that he knew Yili had money, the female attendant quickly helped him choose clothes. After trying on a few sets, Yili was satisfied and paid without hesitation. He didn't have a clear concept of money at this point. If he ran out of it, he could always exchange more in the Point Mall. At this moment, the female attendant finally realized how wealthy Yili was. "The clothes you picked for me are very good. These are tips for you," Yili said calmly. With that, Yili casually pulled out a handful of post-apocalyptic coins from his pocket and handed them to the female attendant. The female attendant was stunned, feeling a trembling sensation throughout her body. She accepted the post-apocalyptic coins that Yili handed over, and her palms couldn't help but feel hot. She had never received so much in tips before. The female attendant stared at the post-apocalyptic coins in her hand in amazement. She could hardly believe it was real. If she sent this money to her mother would be ecstatic. At the same time, she also understood the truth. Don't judge a book by its cover. The sea is immeasurable and people are unfathomable. When the female attendant raised her head to thank Yili, she realized that he had already disappeared without a trace. Chapter 346. Why are you here? Now that he had bought new clothes, Yili thought it was time to get a haircut. His hair was currently flowing down his shoulders. He entered a fairly decent barbershop and after getting his hair done, he went to a hotel. After taking a shower, he changed into his newly bought clothes. Yili stood by the mirror looking at the person in the reflection. "Not bad," Yili muttered to himself. It had been a while since he had enjoyed a proper meal in the wilderness zone. Since he was in Sky Blue Bay City, he thought it was time to find a good place to eat. Afterward, Yili left the hotel and used his heavenly spirit eyes to survey the area, eventually finding a Western restaurant that seemed quite nice. Upon arriving at the restaurant, Yili took a seat by the window and ordered an expensive steak and red wine. Before he could start eating, a jarring voice reached his ears. "Don't you know this is my seat?" The voice was arrogant, causing everyone in the restaurant to look over. They couldn't help but start discussing the situation. "Oh, it's young Master Gu. This will be interesting. This guy took young Master Gu's seat. He's in for trouble. Who dares to provoke young Master Gu in Sky Blue Bay City?" The voices of the people in the restaurant naturally reached Yili's ears. However, he paid no attention to it, maintaining a calm and composed expression without even raising his head. Young Master Gu. A middle-aged, chubby man in his 40s rushed over, his oily face filled with anxiety. This middle-aged man was the manager of the Western restaurant. A small restaurant like this naturally didn't dare to offend someone like Gu Bai. "Are you trying to go out of business? Even my reserved seat has been taken by someone else," Gu Bai said coldly. The manager was startled by Gu Bai's words. He quickly looked at the terrified waiter next to him and shouted, "Do you want to lose your job? Do you even realize that it's young Master Gu's reserved seat?" The waiter was stunned and didn't know how to react. "What are you standing there for? Get that person to move to another seat," the manager ordered. The waiter hurried to Yi Li's side and said, "Sir, I'm really sorry, but this seat is reserved for young Master Gu." Before the waiter could finish his sentence, Yi Li interrupted him. "I don't like your voice. Let him come and talk to me himself," Yi Li said calmly. The waiter was now in a dilemma, not knowing whether to stay or leave. "I, Gu Bai, am somewhat of a figure in Sky Blue Bay City. Today I want to see who is so audacious as to sit in my reserved seat." Gu Bai, with disdain in his eyes, looked at Yi Li. Suddenly he felt like he had seen this man's face before. "Is that so?" Yi Li put down his knife and fork and slowly raised his head. Gu Bai looked at Yi Li's face and his pupils contracted rapidly. It's you." Gu Bai had seen this face in the Falling Rock Mountain Range, the Tier 1 evolved being. But at that time, there were so many ferocious wolves around. How did this person manage to survive? Could it be? Gu Bai thought of a possibility. Perhaps Xiaoxi hadn't died and she had used some treasure to save him. "I never expected you to survive. Truly surprising," Gu Bai said with a faint smile. Chapter 347. Can't even throw a punch. Yi Li didn't pay any further attention to Gu Bai and continued to eat his steak with the knife and fork. Seeing this, Gu Bai furrowed his brows. As the eldest young master of the Gu family in Sky Blue Bay City, he was rarely ignored like this. "Didn't one just tell you? This is my reserved seat. Considering we've met before, I'll let it slide this time. So leave," Gu Bai said. But Yi Li acted as if he didn't hear him. He was still eating his steak and drinking red wine. Gu Bai gritted his teeth, his eyes already spewing out anger. "I'll say it again. If you don't leave now, don't blame me for being impolite," Gu Bai warned. As a third-tier evolved being and the eldest young master of the Gu family, being ignored by someone like Yi Li, a first-tier evolved being, was infuriating. The patrons in the Western restaurant were shocked, thinking that Yi Li must have a death wish to disregard young Master Gus' words like this. Yi Li, unfazed, slowly put down his knife and fork, looking at Gu Bai calmly. "Do you know how pitiful you are?" Gu Bai was taken aback. He couldn't have imagined that Yi Li would say such words. "What do you mean?" Gu Bai stared at Yi Li. "Isn't it pitiful for an ant like you to talk to someone like me?" Yi Li said lightly. When these words came out, everyone in the restaurant couldn't help but gasp in astonishment, staring at Yi Li with wide eyes. Gu Bai was dumbfounded. He never expected Yi Li to call him an ant. "Leave. One have no interest in you," Yi Li said leisurely. "You're asking for death." Gu Bai roared. With a snarl, Gu Bai clenched his fist and threw a punch at Yi Li. His fist was surrounded by red spiritual energy, marking him as an great genetic warrior. Yi Li shook his head inwardly, wondering why there were so many pests like this around. The people in the restaurant sighed and anticipated Yi Li's fate. In Sky Blue Bay City, although Gu Bai wasn't the most powerful young master, those who dared to provoke him were few and far between. Yi Li made no effort to defend himself, and he didn't even attempt to dodge. It was as if he hadn't noticed Gu Bai's punch coming at him. Gu Bai's fist, imbued with red spiritual energy, was about to hit Yi Li's body. With a triumphant smirk on his face, he expected to see Yi Li's painful reaction. However, what happened next shocked everyone. Clank. The fist, enveloped in red spiritual energy, struck Yi Li's body but made a clanking sound as if it had hit metal. Ah! What followed was a piercing pig-like scream of agony that filled the air. It was Gu Bai who was now howling in pain. Gu Bai clutched his injured hand, writhing in agony. He had never experienced such intense pain in his entire life. Everyone in the restaurant stared at Yi Li. They didn't expect Yi Li to be an evolved being even stronger than young Master Gu. Yi Li looked at Gu Bai with indifference and said, "You can't even throw a punch. Are you sure you're not an ant?" Gu Bai was still writhing in pain, and the restaurant patrons were too stunned to offer any sympathy. At that moment, 3 middle-aged men rushed into the restaurant. "Young master, are you all right?" they exclaimed. The patrons immediately realized that these were genetic warriors from the Gu family. Chapter 348. Equipment Enhancement Stone. The 3 middle-aged men who rushed in were all 5th-tier evolved beings and had encountered Yi Li in the Falling Rock Mountain Range before. Give him a beating," Gu Bai roared in pain and anger. The 3 Tier 5 evolved beings looked at Yi Li and were a little stunned. Obviously they had discovered that they had seen Yi Li in the wilderness area. "How dare you hurt our young master? Go to hell." A Tier 5 evolved being shouted angrily. As soon as he finished speaking, this Tier 5 evolved being punched out like the wind, and his fist was also filled with red spiritual energy. He was in Class Genetic Warrior. The power of a pure punch was dozens of times weaker than a punch with spiritual energy. If a punch from a Tier 5 evolved being with Class Gene hit an ordinary person, the latter would definitely die. Yi Li raised his finger. The one young finger wasn't very powerful and didn't have obvious effects on genetic warriors of the same realm or humans. But for low-level genetic warriors, it was terrifyingly powerful. Swish! A shocking golden spiritual light burst from Yi Li's finger. The 5th tier evolved being widened his eyes in disbelief. He could never have expected that Yi Li could launch such an attack. It was too late to dodge. The golden spiritual light struck the 5th tier evolved being's arm directly. Instantly, the 5th tier evolved being was sent flying, crashing heavily into the wall. The remaining 2 5th tier evolved beings were stunned. They hadn't even processed what had happened when they too charged at Yi Li. Yi Li smiled, thinking that these two were just stupid flies. Swoosh swoosh. 2 more shocking golden spiritual lights burst from Yi Li's fingers. Yi Li was now a 9th tier evolved being, a practitioner of the 4th layer of the ancient devil tome. There was no way these 2 5th tier evolved beings could withstand his attacks. Unsurprisingly, the arms of the 2 5th tier evolved beings were pierced, and they were sent flying backward just like their companion. Gubai, witnessing all of this, was dumbfounded. He had even forgotten about the pain from his injured hand. He could never have imagined that Yi Li was this powerful. Yi Li found this encounter rather uninteresting. Even while having a meal, he attracted such annoying flies. He took out a stack of post-apocalyptic coins from his pocket, placed it on the table and then calmly left. He left the restaurant's customers in a state of shock, like statues frozen in place. Yi Li wondered whether he should go see Xiaxi. After pondering for a few seconds, he shook his head. "All Xia-chan is having a concert in 10 days. Hurry up and get tickets." As Yi Li walked a few steps away, he heard a voice that caught his attention. He couldn't believe there were still stars in this post-apocalyptic world. It seemed interesting. A concert in 10 days and they were already selling tickets. It appeared that Xia-chun was a big star. Without thinking too much, Yi Li returned to his hotel room to spend the night. The next day, sunlight streamed in through the window, casting a radiant glow on his handsome face. Zombie chest Zio. Yi Li opened the zombie chest with a single command: acquire gene points, 1,000 strength points, 1,000 speed points, 1,000 defense points, 1,000. Acquired equipment enhancement stone 11. Yi Li integrated the acquired attribute points into his body and then examined the description of the equipment enhancement stone. Equipment enhancement stone enhances equipment, allowing it to increase by 1 level, up to S level. Yi Li thought about his dragon-slaying blade and heavenly tower, both of which were beyond SSS tier artifacts. They had no need for this equipment enhancement stone. He then checked the equipment of the Apocalypse Legion. Adas silver boxing gloves were S level, Swordsman all cheese cleave sword was S level, but Longius water and fire merciless spear was only level. Chapter 349, 5th tier spirit soul. Without much thought, Yi Li attached equipment strengthening stones to the water and fire merciless spear. Strengthening initiated, IO%, 30%, 60%, IO%. Strengthening successful. Water and fire merciless spear has been upgraded to S grade. Currently Long Yu was only a 4th tier zombie and too weak. Yi Li planned to visit various areas of Sky Blue Base City to level up Long Yu and also synthesize some clawed zombies. Afterward Yi Li got up, freshened up and left the city. Once outside the outer walls of Sky Blue Base City, Yi Li arrived at another city, a mid-sized one. He released the Apocalypse Legion from the system space and had them attract zombies. Giggle, don't run, human. Your destiny is to have your soul devoured by me. A few minutes later, a piercing voice reached Yi Li's ears. Yi Li followed the voice and saw a woman about his age being chased by a spirit soul. The spirit soul was of the 5th tier while the woman was a 4th tier evolved being. The woman seemed exhausted, and it appeared that she had not only been through a fierce battle, but had also run for quite a while. The woman was running in Yi Li's direction, with the spirit soul close behind, constantly taunting her. Suddenly the woman spotted Yi Li and her pupils contracted. "Run!" she yelled at Yi Li. Yi Li gave a faint smile. He hadn't expected the woman to be so kind-hearted, just like Xia Shi. On the surface she seemed as cold as ice, but her heart was hundreds of times kinder than an average person's. The woman was startled, not understanding why Yili wasn't running. Behind her was a fifth-tier spirit soul. Run. There is a dark race member behind me. The woman shouted at Yili again, thinking he might not have heard. However, Yili still appeared to not hear anything, remaining motionless with a calm and composed expression on his face. The woman clenched her teeth. The man had a chance to live, but he was acting like a deaf person. She had no other choice. Finally the woman reached Yili. She didn't want to bother with him because she thought he was either crazy or foolish. Even after seeing a fifth-tier spirit soul, he still didn't run. As she was about to run past Yili, a hand suddenly grabbed her hand. The woman was shocked as if she had been struck by lightning, her entire body shivering. Her fair face was filled with horror. Who was this person? Why did he grab my hand? The fifth-tier spirit soul also stopped. Spirit souls had no physical form, similar to the Grim Reaper in Chinese movies, only lacking a scythe. Giggle, one didn't expect another human to join us. It seems you'll have a feast today, the fifth-tier spirit soul laughed smugly. Leave or you will die soon, Yili calmly said to the fifth-tier spirit soul. The woman was dumbfounded. She couldn't believe what Yili had just said. What are you doing? This is a fifth-tier spirit soul. The woman quickly whispered to Yili. She had initially wanted to help him escape, but he not only didn't run, but also grabbed her hand. Moreover, what was going on with his hand? The woman felt that Yili's hand was like a vice, firmly holding hers. Yili smiled. He looked at the woman and said in a calm tone, "Is a fifth-tier spirit soul very strong?" Chapter 350. The shock has just begun. The woman was taken aback. She couldn't believe that Yili had just said such words. Is a fifth-tier soul spirit really that powerful? She was a fourth-tier evolved being, so if a fifth-tier soul spirit wasn't strong enough, would she need to flee? Human, do you think I'm strong? The fifth-tier soul spirit looked at Yili with a mischievous grin. In his eyes, both Yili and the woman were already his prey. Yili thought for a few seconds and then looked at the fifth-tier soul spirit and said, I not only think you're not strong, but you're also as weak as an ant. What? The fifth-tier soul spirit was shocked to hear this and couldn't believe that Yili would say such a thing. The woman was also stunned, wondering how this person could say such words. Such an arrogant human. He'll devour your soul right now and see if you're still arrogant. The fifth-tier soul spirit said coldly. As he spoke, the fifth-tier soul spirit rushed towards Yili. The woman, seeing this, turned pale with shock and stood there, not knowing what to do. Suddenly Yili raised his index finger and looked calmly. The woman could swear that she had never been so shocked in her entire life. At a moment of life and death, he was still calmly looking at his finger? Was he already beyond caring about life and death, or did he not realize he was about to die? The woman closed her eyes, knowing that Yili's fate would be very tragic. Just as the fifth-tier soul spirit was about to attack, Yili pointed his finger. I have one finger piercing through the sky. A terrifying golden spirit light shot towards the fifth-tier soul spirit. The fifth-tier soul spirit widened his eyes and tried to stop, but his speed was too fast and he couldn't stop in time. Ali! The horrifying golden spirit light had pierced through the fifth-tier soul spirit's body. Listening to his screams, the woman opened her eyes and was shocked. The fifth-tier soul spirit was disappearing visibly at an alarming rate, and the screams were truly hair-raising. In the end, the fifth-tier soul spirit disappeared forever from the world. You. The woman took 3 steps back. She finally understood why Yili could be so calm. It turned out that Yili was such a powerful individual. Yili looked at the woman indifferently and said slowly, Are you very shocked? The woman was stunned. She was indeed extremely shocked. Just as the woman didn't know how to respond, Yili spoke again. Never stop being shocked because everything one do will keep you shocked for 3 days and 3 nights. Upon hearing this, the woman was even more shocked. She looked at Yili, who was handsome and seemingly close to her age. Why was his cultivation tier so high? She didn't understand, she really didn't. What's your name? Yili suddenly asked. I'm Xia-chun, the woman replied. Xia-chun? Yili thought for a moment. He seemed to have heard that name in the sky blue base city. Right, it was that famous singer Xia-chun who was going to have a concert in 10 days. Could this be the same famous star? Xia-chun stole a glance at Yili and took another look. She had never seen anyone like Yili before. She thought the shock she just experienced was the most shocking moment of her life. But even if she used all her strength, she couldn't have imagined that the shock had only just begun. Roar! The Apocalypse Legion, accompanied by zombies, had already come from all directions. Chapter 351, A Fifth-Tier Zombie, This. Xia Chun looked at the scene before her in utter shock. How was this possible? Thousands of zombies? And Xia Chun's eyes widened more than they ever had in her life. She rubbed her eyes, feeling like she must be seeing things. 6 golden purple-eyed zombies? 9th-tier zombies. Seeing this, Xia Chun's soul seemed to shudder. She quickly looked at Yi Li and found his face seemed as if he hadn't noticed these zombies at all. What should we do? Xia Chun asked Yi Li. Yi Li waved his hand calmly and said, No need to panic. Xia Chun was taken aback. With so many zombies, 6 9th-tier zombies and 1 4th-tier zombie. Could he remain so calm? Xia Chun couldn't fathom Yi Li's composure. She couldn't even dream that there could be such a composed person in this world. The Apocalypse Legion had led the zombies close, most of which were level 1 zombies. Yi Li took a look and noticed several dozen level 2 clawed zombies. Not only could they tear up Long Yu, but they could also be used to synthesize some clawed zombies. This was a good opportunity. Attack! Yi Li ordered the army of the Apocalypse Legion. With Yi Li's command, the Apocalypse Legion began to take action. Yi Li opened the synthesis grid in his mind and started synthesizing. He synthesized a level 3 clawed zombie, then another level 3 clawed zombie. Ding! Long Yu has leveled up to a 5th-tier zombie. These zombies' levels were too low, they were all level 1 zombies. It felt uninteresting to synthesize them after getting used to synthesizing level 3 to 5 zombies in the wilderness zone. He checked and found that there were 15 level 3 clawed zombies now. Including the 3 he had synthesized previously, he now had a total of 18 clawed zombies. Yi Li had no plans to synthesize these 18 level 3 clawed zombies. Instead, he intended to cultivate them. Thinking of the legendary Yen Yun 18 riders in the ancient times, he decided to name his group the 18 Clawed. He looked at Xia Chun again and found her standing still like a statue. Yi Li shook his head. He had clearly told her never to be shocked, so why wasn't she listening? However, he could understand. Who could remain unshaken when facing him? Yi Li. He doubted he could find anyone like that in this world. Yi Li found a place to sit down. He hadn't eaten since leaving Sky Blue Bay City, so he took out a box of food from the system space and began to eat and drink. Xia Chun swallowed hard. She felt as though all the strength in her body had been drained. Only now did she truly understand what kind of person Yi Li was. No. Yi Li was not a person but a member of the dark race, an entity that she couldn't imagine how powerful it was. After finishing his meal, Yi Li planned to continue finding zombies to synthesize. Long Yu was only a 5th-tier zombie now. Her level was too low. He also wanted to figure out the location of the super treasure map, but at the moment he had no clue. When he left the wilderness zone, the coordinates had suddenly disappeared from his mind, something he had never experienced before. Roar! Suddenly Yi Li heard a fierce zombie roar. Turning around, he saw that a zombie was already engaged in a battle with Xia Chun. What surprised Yi Li was that this particular zombie was a 5th-tier zombie. A 5th-tier zombie. Could there be 5th-tier zombies here? Yi Li's face showed a trace of excitement. After all, Long Yu was only a 5th-tier zombie now. Chapter 352. Rescuing Xia Chun. Xia Chun was grappling with the 5th-tier male zombie. She was a 4th-tier evolved being and had been severely frightened. Without paying attention for a moment, she was bitten on the arm by the 5th-tier male zombie. Xia Chun turned pale with shock. Being bitten by a zombie meant she would also turn into one. She hadn't even had the chance to inspect the wound when the 5th-tier male zombie let out a roar and lunged towards her. Xia Chun's eyes widened, realizing that she was powerless to resist the attack of the 5th-tier male zombie. But to her surprise, just as the 5th-tier male zombie was about to pounce on her, it was suddenly struck by a horrifying golden spirit light and fell to the ground. Yi Li opened the synthesis grid in his mind and merged the 5th-tier male zombie with Long Yu, which resulted in Long Yu becoming a 6th-tier zombie. Yi Li considered himself lucky. Generally, it would take quite some effort to synthesize Long Yu into a 6th-tier zombie. As Yi Li looked at Xia Chun, he noticed that her arm had already started to show signs of zombification, and it wouldn't be long before she turned into a zombie herself. Am I going to turn into a zombie? Xia Chun looked at the zombification on her arm, her eyes becoming lifeless, and her once fair face losing its luster. She didn't want to become a zombie, she really didn't want to. At this moment, Xia Chun deeply regretted her decision to come here. If she could do it over, she would never have come. Her concert was just 10 days away, and yet she had chosen to come here for some experience. Looking at Xia Chun, Yili couldn't help but think of Xiao Hui. Back then, Xiao Hui had been ambushed by a zombie and nearly turned into a zombie. Senior, am one going to turn into a zombie soon? Xiao Hui's words still echoed in Yili's ears. Yili sighed inwardly, wondering how Xiao Hui was doing now. If she were here, she definitely wouldn't want Xia Chun to become a zombie. In that case, one will save her. Immediately, Yili walked towards Xia Chun with majestic air. Xia Chun, who was watching her own hands zombify, trembled violently. Then she clenched her teeth and made a decision. That decision was to commit suicide. She would rather die than become a zombie. With all her remaining strength, Xia Chun raised her palm and activated a trace of purple spirit energy that ran through her body. Purple spirit energy was an S-level genetic warrior's ability. Just as her palm with the purple spirit energy was about to strike her chest, a strong hand grabbed her hand. Xia Chun was startled and she looked at Yi Li in astonishment. You? Yi Li didn't reply. Instead, he gently tapped Xia Chun's head, and she immediately lost consciousness. Here, skip half an hour. As her entire body shivered, Yi Li began to feel bored. The zombification on Xia Chun's body had disappeared. Yi Li felt no guilt. He was saving Xia Chun's life. Whether in the apocalypse or in the world he came from, a woman's most precious thing was always her life. Not long after, Xia Chun slowly opened her eyes. After waking up, Xia Chun suddenly remembered something, and her whole body trembled. She quickly looked at her hands. Upon seeing this, she was dumbfounded. One didn't turn into a zombie? Xia Chun found it hard to believe. She distinctly remembered being bitten by the zombie, and her body had already started to zombify. Chapter 353. A 7th-tier member of Dark Knight tribe. Xia Chun couldn't imagine why she didn't become a zombie after being bitten by a zombie. She thought for a moment. She remembered that when she was about to kill herself, a strong hand grabbed her hand. At this point, Xia Chun could only think of one possibility. She nodded slightly and looked at the silent Yi Li. The astonishing display of power Yi Li had just shown had left her in shock, and she now understood that Yi Li was an immensely powerful member of the Dark Race. Did this member of the Dark Race save me? Xia Chun wondered to herself. There was no one else here, and since Yi Li was the one who had saved her, she couldn't think of any other reason. But he was a Dark Race member. Would he actually save people? Everyone in the Sky Blue Bay City knew that the Dark Race was universally condemned, and it was rumored that the zombie virus had been created by a supreme being from the Dark Race. Yi Li had been in this parallel world for a while now, and every time he synthesized zombies, people nearby would think he was a member of the Dark Race. Although Xia Chun didn't speak, he could tell with his toes that she also thought that he was a member of the Dark Race, a powerful one. Don't just stand there. Yes, one did save you, and I am not a member of the Dark Race. Yi Li looked at Xia Chun and said calmly. Xia Chun was surprised by Yi Li's words. She hadn't expected him to say that. Senior, are you really not a member of the Dark Race? Xia Chun remembered that just a moment ago, Yi Li had reduced the number of zombies and made the high-leveled zombies seem to obey his commands. Wasn't that something only the Dark Race could do? Yi Li gave a faint smile. Do you think I need to lie to you? He didn't want to explain because trying to explain to these low-leveled evolved beings was like casting pearls before swine. Yi Li didn't continue to pay attention to Xia Chun. While she was fair-skinned and beautiful, he had encountered countless beautiful women, and she was not the only one with such looks. He wondered why there would be a 5th-tier zombie in this small city. Such high-tiered zombies were rare, and he had only encountered them in the wilderness zone. Have you seen where my zombie went? Suddenly, a very cold voice reached Yi Li's ears. Yi Li followed the voice and saw a Dark Race member completely shrouded in dark energy on the nearby high-rise building. The Dark Race member was holding a silver horn and appeared extremely eerie. A 7th-tier member of the Dark Race, Yi Li murmured to himself. To be honest, a 7th-tier member of the Dark Race should be like a mountain to Xia Chun. However, for Yi Li, they were nothing more than ants. A 5th-tier zombie ran over here just now. Did you see it? The 7th-tier Dark Race member continued to ask. The 7th-tier Dark Race member was enveloped in an aura of darkness, making it impossible to see their appearance. However, just listening to their cold voice was enough to send shivers down one's spine. That 5th-tier zombie ran to us, so we saw it, Yi Li said lightly. Oh. The 7th-tier Dark Race member seemed somewhat stunned. Since you saw my zombies, why are you still alive? The 7th tier Dark Race member asked. The 7th tier Dark Race member was from a tribe of the Dark Races, called the Dark Knight tribe. Their ability was to control mutated zombies. Yili pondered for a few seconds and then looked at the 7th tier Dark Knight tribe member and slowly said, "Perhaps it's because we're too cute, so it didn't want to bite us." Yili replied nonchalantly. "Want to gift the story? Try one." Chapter 354. What realm are you in? The 7th tier Dark Knight tribe member was taken aback, clearly not expecting Yili to respond this way. "Human, how can you remain so calm in front of me?" The 7th tier Dark Knight tribe member thought that Yili must haven't seen his zombies, but he couldn't understand how Yili could be so composed in his presence. Yili smiled and replied, "I'm always this calm no matter who I'm facing. It's just how 1 a.m. For some reason, Xia Chun wasn't worried at all at this moment. After witnessing Yi Li's incredible abilities, she knew that the strange 7th tier Dark Race member on the tall building couldn't possibly be a match for Yi Li. The 7th tier Dark Knight tribe member sneered, "Human, I just wanted to ask where my zombies went, but now one think I should kill you." Yi Li thought that this 7th tier Dark Knight tribe member could have been living well, but he just wanted to provoke him. As the saying went, heaven has a road, you don't take it. Hell has no door, you barge in. If you want to kill me, come and try. Yi Li slowly hooked his finger at the Tier 7 Dark Knight tribe member. The 7th tier Dark Knight tribe member widened his eyes as if he had never been insulted in such a manner before. He glared at Yi Li and angrily declared, "Human, you're asking for death." With that, a surge of dark energy rushed toward Yi Li. Yi Li watched as the dark energy approached. While it had formidable power, it was still no match for him. The 7th tier Dark Knight tribe member chuckled coldly. In his eyes, this attack would surely be fatal for Yi Li. Just as the dark energy was about to reach Yi Li, he raised his finger and golden spiritual light radiated from it. Swish! With a sharp sound, the astonishing golden spiritual light clashed with the dark energy, completely dispelling it. Xia Chun had not paid attention earlier, but now, as she watched the dark energy burst forth from Yi Li's fingertip, her eyes widened in shock. ASSS tier genetic warrior. Xia Chun's heart was in turmoil. She had heard of SSS tier genetic warriors but had never seen one. She had always thought that such warriors only existed in legends. Yet now she found herself face to face with an SSS tier genetic warrior, and it left her utterly astonished. Yi Li was a 9th tier evolved being who had practiced the 4th level of the Ancient Devil Tome. The Ancient Devil Tome was equivalent to the inner martial arts techniques in martial arts novels, such as the Eagle Claw or Dragon Subduing Palm. However, the Dark Race member on the tall building was only 7th tier, and there was no way he could match Yi Li. It was like a monster facing Ultraman, and the outcome was certain. Without a doubt, at the moment when the golden spiritual light clashed with the dark energy was completely dispersed. The terrifying golden spiritual light surged toward the 7th tier Dark Race member on the tall building. The 7th tier Dark Race member, perched on the tall building, was greatly alarmed. He never would have thought that Yi Li was so terrifying. In a desperate attempt, he quickly dodged the attack. A 7th tier Dark Race member was already considered a high-level Dark Race member. The 7th tier Dark Race member managed to evade the assault of the golden spiritual light. "Human, what realm are you in?" The 7th tier Dark Race member looked at Yi Li with utter shock. He had originally thought that Yi Li was as good as dead, but he never expected himself to provoke someone he shouldn't. Yi Li contemplated for a few seconds and then looked at the 7th tier Dark Knight tribe member. "It's not that high, just the 9th tier. Chapter 355. Do you think you can survive? When Yi Li said those words, the 7th tier Dark Knight tribe member was instantly filled with shock. "And I, 9th tier evolved being?" The 7th tier Dark Race member would rather believe that the sky was about to fall than accept that Yi Li was a 9th tier evolved being. Although he didn't want to believe it, the power Yi Li had just displayed left him with no choice but to believe. Xia Chun was also in complete awe. She had never imagined that Yi Li was a 9th tier evolved being. After contemplating for a few seconds, the 7th tier Dark Knight tribe member said to Yi Li, "Human, I apologize for my earlier offense. One will leave now." This 7th tier Dark Knight tribe member adhered to the principle of, with green hills remaining, there's no need to worry about running out of firewood, so he was preparing to depart. However, just as he took a step, Yi Li's voice reached his ears. "Do you really think you can survive?" The 7th tier Dark Race member was stunned and turned around to find Yi Li looking at him with indifference. Then, the dark race member clenched his teeth and stared at Yi Li. Human, even if you're a 9th-tier evolved being, do you really think you can kill me if one want to escape? Yi Li chuckled. He was amused. He hadn't been this happy in the past 10 days. Could he kill him? A mere 7th-tier dark race member dared to say such words to him, Yi Li. How could he not laugh? Why are you laughing? The 7th-tier dark race member stared at Yi Li with a cold expression. Since you believe that I can't kill you, why don't you give it a try? Yi Li replied slowly. Silence, a deathly silence. The 7th-tier dark race member's face turned incredibly cold. He glared at Yi Li in anger. Human, don't underestimate me. As soon as he finished speaking, the Tier 7 Dark Knight tribe member turned around and exuded a dark aura as if he was about to disappear into the dark aura. At that moment, Yi Li activated his swift steps, leaving only an afterimage in his original position. When Yi Li reappeared, he was already on the rooftop where the 7th-tier dark race member was located. The entire process had been lightning fast, taking less than a second. The 7th-tier Dark Knight tribe member who saw this was terrified beyond belief. Human, you. The 7th-tier dark race member hadn't finished speaking when his life was extinguished forever. Yi Li had drawn an unparalleled demonic blade from the system space. An illusory blood dragon with 5 claws coiled in the sky, and the sound of a dragon's roar mixed with the ringing of a blade filled the air, sending shivers down the spine. Yi Li raised the blade and unleashed a slash. Swish. This slash possessed a terrifying power that was beyond comparison. All? With a deafening scream, the 7th-tier dark race member's life was forever extinguished. Yi Li sheathed the dragon-slaying blade back into the system space and leaped to Xia Chun's side. At this moment, Xia Chun was in a state of shock, recalling the words Yi Li had said to her. Are you very shocked? Never be too shocked because everything one do will leave you astonished for 3 days and 3 nights. But, despite trying to resist the astonishment, she couldn't help but be amazed. Xia Chun could no longer fathom Yi Li's terror. As she looked at his slightly slender figure, she felt as if he could conquer the world. Miss, you are indeed here. A somewhat flustered voice suddenly appeared, followed by more than a dozen middle-aged men rushing over. The Xiaxi he had met before was cold and aloof, but the current Xiaxi seemed a bit mischievous. Tell me, did you tell father about my whereabouts? Xia Chun asked Xiaxi. I lie. Father kept pressing me, so I had no choice but to tell him. Xiaxi said like a child who had done something wrong, lowering her head in embarrassment. Sister, one feel like I'm done for, Xiaxi suddenly said. As her words fell, Xiaxi raised her head, but as she did so, she couldn't say anything more. A handsome face was reflected in her pupils, a face she had dreamed of at least 10 times. Say, Senior? Xiaxi was dumbfounded. She couldn't believe it. She hurriedly rubbed her eyes, but no matter how she rubbed, the person in front of her remained the same. After all, Xia Chun belonged to the younger generation, so she must have limitless potential for the future. Are you an ordinary person? The girl who had just spoken to Yi Li asked. Her words implied that Yi Li must be an ordinary person who didn't even understand the system of evolved beings unless he was incredibly powerful. The younger generation of the Xia family certainly wouldn't believe that Yi Li was a super powerhouse. However, even if he were an ordinary person, he should at least know about the system of evolved beings, right? In the eyes of the younger generation of the Xia family, Yi Li's words were absurd. Yi Li smiled faintly. If I were an ordinary person, how could I have saved Xia Chun? Want to gift the story? Try one. Golden spiritual attack? At the same time, the young generation of the Xia family thought of a terrifying possibility. They stared at Yi Li in shock. Golden spiritual energy only belonged to an SSS-tier genetic warrior. Their eyes widened to the largest they had ever been in their lives, and they dared to swear that they had never been this shocked before. Now they understood that everything Yi Li had said was true. Just a moment ago they had mocked Yi Li, but now they wished they could find a hole to hide in. The huge boulder turned to dust and the sound traveled quite far. Everyone in the Xia family heard the loud noise and rushed out to investigate. What's going on? A middle-aged man shouted from afar. Chapter 359. This is Mystic Ironstone. The young generation of the Xia family quickly made way, and even without turning around they knew who was shouting. It was the head of the Xia family, an 8th-tier evolved being, Xia Hong. Xia Hong, along with several elders from the Xia family, emerged from the hall with Xia Chun and Xia Shi by his side. "Master," he turned that large stone into dust with his eyes, a young man said to Xia Hong. As soon as these words were spoken, both Xia Hong and the others were left dumbfounded. Xia Hong immediately looked in the direction of the big boulder. But what remained there was nothing but a pile of dust. Seeing this, Xia Hong's pupils contracted rapidly. That was mystic iron stone. He had gone to great lengths to obtain that mystic iron stone, and it had turned into dust? Who did this? Who? Xia Hong angrily demanded. "It was him, master." A young man quickly pointed at Yili. Xia Hong turned his gaze toward Yili, and for a moment he was taken aback. "You?" Xia Hong remembered Yili from their encounter in the falling rock mountain range. He had never expected Yili to come from the wilderness zone to the Sky Blue Bay City. He still clearly recalled how arrogant Yili had been when they met in the wilderness. But now, wait. Xia Hong suddenly thought of something. Someone had just told him that Yili had turned his mystic iron stone into dust using his eyes. This couldn't be possible. Even an 8th-tier evolved being like Xia Hong, even if he were to die, wouldn't dare to believe that someone could turn a huge mystic iron stone into dust with his eyes. He had never even heard of such a thing. "I didn't expect that, Master Xia Hong. Your hard-earned mystic iron stone has turned into dust. What a pity." A 7th-tier evolved being said to Xia Hong. This 7th-tier evolved being wasn't a member of the Xia family but rather from the Gu family, one of the 8 families in the Sky Blue Bay City. When Yili first met Xia Shi, she had told Xia Chun that she was in big trouble. The reason was that the Gu family's genetic warrior had come to the Xia family with only one purpose. That was to propose marriage between the Gu family's young master, Gu Bai, and Xia Shi. Unfortunately, Xia Shi had never liked Gu Bai. It was nothing more than a family arrangement, and the events that had happened in the falling rock mountain range had made Xia Shi completely see through what kind of person Gu Bai was. Xia Hong's anger flared up even more when he heard this. He glared at Yili and demanded, "How did you turn my mystic iron stone into this? Didn't someone just tell you?" "I used my eyes." "Could it be that you're suffering from senility?" Yili's face showed a playful expression. With this remark, Xia Hong froze like he had turned into stone. As an 8th-tier evolved being and the head of the Xia family, he had never heard anyone speak to him in such a manner. The Xia family members were all left looking at each other because they thought Yili was extremely arrogant for daring to speak to their master this way. Yili hadn't even finished speaking when the 7th-tier evolved being from the Gu family spoke to him. "Brat, who do you think you are? How dare you speak to Master Xia Hong like this?" The 7th-tier evolved being stared at Yili disdainfully. Yili was slightly stunned when he heard that. He thought to himself, even if it doesn't rain there will be dog pea moss? What should I say about you? Yili looked at the Tier 7 evolved being and said slowly. The 7th-tier evolved being was shocked. He clearly didn't understand what Yili meant. "Brat, what do you mean?" The 7th-tier evolved being stared at Yili. Yili thought for a moment and then said to the 7th-tier evolved being with a faint smile, "Have you ever heard the saying, those who create their own problems deserve it?" Chapter 360. Too weak. The 7th-tier evolved being from the Gu family was stunned, and then he stared at Yili with an intense gaze. "What did you say? Those who create their own problems deserve it?" As an elder of the Gu family, when had anyone ever dared to speak to him like this? Not only the 7th-tier evolved being from the Gu family, but even the Xia family members were shocked by Yili's words. They couldn't fathom how Yili dared to say such things. Xia Hong looked at Yili. When he had encountered Yili in the falling rock mountain range, he had already felt displeased with Yili. Now, seeing Yili turn his mystic iron stone into dust, Xia Hong's anger flared up even more. Suddenly, Xia Hong noticed that Yili looked very young, especially his eyes. No one could forget those eyes. His eyes were as serene as the night and as profound as the ocean. Yili smiled calmly and looked at the 7th-tier evolved being from the Gu family. "One didn't expect that, besides being pitifully weak, you're also deaf." "What?" With these words, the people from the Xia family were left shocked. They couldn't understand how Yili could dare to speak like this. Was a 7th-tier evolved being really considered weak? In the entire Sky Blue Bay City, there were probably very few who would dare to say such a thing. Xia Chun and Xia Shi, however, knew that Yili was absolutely qualified to say this. After all, they had witnessed Yili's suffocating strength firsthand. The 7th-tier evolved being from the Gu family, upon hearing Yili's words, had his eyes shooting flames. He glared at Yili and angrily shouted, "Brat, you actually dare to call me an ant?" Yili smiled again. "Isn't that right?" The 7th-tier evolved being was even more furious, and he shouted at Yili, 1 a.m. An elder of the Gu family, a 7th-tier evolved being. He believed that someone like Yili couldn't possibly tell his level of cultivation. Otherwise he would have been scared off long ago. However, he couldn't have imagined that Yili, after learning his identity and level of cultivation, would show a look of boredom. Yili shook his head slowly and looked at the 7th-tier evolved being. Too weak. When the 7th-tier evolved being heard this, along with the Xiao family members, they were all left dumbfounded. They couldn't recall being so shocked for at least a decade. You. The 7th-tier evolved being from the Gu family was so angry that his eyes turned red. He stared at Yili, not knowing how to respond. The young generation of the Xiao family was also at a loss. Although Yili had seen through the mystic ironstone with his eyes and was indeed an SSS genetic warrior, the fact remained that the other party was a 7th-tier evolved being. By the way, your eldest young master hasn't been doing too well recently, has he? Yili suddenly asked. The Xia family members were puzzled by this question, but the 7th-tier evolved being from the Gu family, upon hearing it, widened his eyes. How do you know? He quickly asked. Before Yili could answer, the 7th-tier evolved being thought of a shocking possibility. Was it you who injured little Bai? The 7th-tier evolved being stared at Yili. Healy? I just gave him a lesson to let him know that there are some people he shouldn't provoke, Yili replied with a smile. Yili had pierced through Gu Bei's arm with his one young finger. He had also pierced the arms of several 5th-tier evolved beings from the Gu family. What was the difference between this and provoking the entire Gu family? The Gu family had frantically searched for Yili's whereabouts in Sky Blue Base City, but by then Yili had already gone to Jiang City. The 7th-tier evolved being had never dreamed that the person who had provoked the Gu family was right in front of him. Ha ha ha. Suddenly, the 7th-tier evolved being burst into laughter, his face twisted with anger. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.